The Doctor's Bride, the Romance Bride series, written by Cecelia Dowdy. Text copyright 2023 by Cecelia Dowdy. Production copyright 2025 by Cecelia Dowdy. Praise for Cecelia Dowdy's writing. Dowdy writes with the right touch to keep the readers engaged and vested. USA Today. Chapter 1. Pennsylvania, 1870. Deborah winced as she slammed her book shut and shoved it into the wooden crate. No way could she let Ma see what she was doing. The last thing she needed right now was a lecture. "Deborah!" Oh, Ma's voice was loud as a cat during mating season. She winced at the sound of her mother's approaching hard footsteps. She scooped up an armful of hay and scattered it over the crate, hiding her precious book. The barn door slammed open, the loud sound causing Susie, her black barn cat, to scurry toward her. She scooped up the cat and smoothed her hand along the animal's shiny dark fur. "What are you doing in here?" Her mother scanned the barn as if searching for a long-lost secret. It was hard to keep anything from Ma, but she just wouldn't tell Ma about her secret, at least not yet. "I'm petting Susie." Well, at least that wasn't a lie. She'd been petting Susie since her Ma had stormed into the barn. Ma placed her hands over her ample hips and sniffed. "Smells like peppermint. Have you been making your peppermint oil?" Deborah pushed her spectacles up on her nose and pointed to the small open satchel. "Yes, I need to have some on hand to sell." She'd been making it shortly before she'd started. Well, doing what she didn't want her Ma to know about. She'd sold out of the last batch. Her peppermint oil was known to help folks with runny noses and fevers. Susie squirmed, so Deborah stood and released her cat before focusing on Ma again. Ma shook her head. "You're always thinking about making money selling peppermint oil. Deborah, you've been focusing on the wrong things. That's why you're not married." "Ma, I'm sure you didn't come out here to talk about that." Honestly, her Ma made her feel downright sick and unsettled at times. Before her fraternal twin sister Eve passed away, Deborah had thought about finding another place to teach, a place far away from her folks. She'd never been away from them, and yes, it would have been hard. But after Eve passed, she found that her goals had changed. She just couldn't leave Ma and Pa alone, so she'd come up with another plan. A better plan, a plan that would make her feel happier and more content. However, she wasn't sure if her plan would work. Only time and a lot of prayer would help her to figure that out. "I've been calling you for the longest time." Her mother sighed before fingering the white bonnet on her head. Her smooth, pudgy brown face softened as she gazed at her daughter. "It's time for you to go to the train station to pick up Timothy and Lily." Deborah turned away from Ma and focused on the barn floor. She didn't feel like fetching her brother-in-law and her niece. Well, that wasn't totally true. She didn't mind fetching Lily, but Timothy now, getting him, made her a bit nervous. Was he still considered her brother-in-law since his wife, her sister, Eve, was dead? She gulped. Her gut still burned with sadness, dread, and something else she couldn't quite decipher since the death of her sister a year ago. "Can't Pa go get them?" Ma placed her arm around Deborah's shoulders. She grabbed her satchel just as her Ma gently led her out of the barn. "Deborah, we've been through this. Your Pa's working the fields. I've got an order of hand pies to make." Her Ma made apple hand pies and sold them to the folks in their small Pennsylvania Negro community. Their farm included a small apple orchard, and harvest season was about to start. Her mouth watered for one of her Ma's pies right now. Her Ma removed a brown paper sack from her pocket. The delicious scent of cinnamon and apples wafted toward her. "I made these for you to eat on your trip." "Thank you, Ma." Just knowing she'd have a treat to enjoy during her trip made her feel a little bit better. Ma squeezed her shoulders. "I've got to make sure all the food is prepared for our dinner with Lily and Timothy. They'll be starving after that long train ride, so that's why I can't come with you." Ma stopped walking and firmly took Deborah's chin, forcing her to look directly into her eyes. You don't have to be scared of him. I know you took a shine to Timothy and he married your sister instead, but that was 8 years ago. He's probably forgotten all about that. And he's sad, grieving over his wife while trying to raise Lily all by himself. He's going to be the town's doctor now, so you've got to get used to being around him. She pointed to the small cabin just a short distance from their house. Since old Dr. Smith had retired and moved, Timothy and Lily would be living nearby in Dr. Smith's old house. It'll be right nice having Lily around. Her ma gave her a sly look. Doesn't look like you'll ever be getting married and giving me some grandbabies, so I'm glad Timothy has agreed to be the new town doctor. It'll give me a chance to spend time with my granddaughter. Deborah blew air through her lips. She honestly didn't know what to say about that. She'd overheard some of the womenfolk at church complaining about their husbands. Were they honestly happy? She sometimes wondered if she was better off alone with Susie for company while she studied her books. You got your lesson plan done for the first day of school tomorrow? Yes. She didn't need to have much of a plan for the first day. It took the kids a day or so to get back into the routine of school. Lily would be in her class, so that was a blessing. After Eve and Timothy had moved away, she'd only seen Lily a few times. She longed to get to know her niece better and hoped Lily would take a liking to her. She got into the wagon, took the reins, and flicked them, and the horses started off at a gentle trot. Ma waved to her as she drove the team of horses down the wooded path. Shouldn't take too long to get to the station since she was getting an early start. As she steered the horses, she removed the paper sack from her pocket and bit into one of the apple hand pies. Apples, cinnamon, sugar, and flaky crust exploded in her mouth with sweetness. Filling drizzled at the side of her lips. She quickly licked it away. Simply delicious. Her ma had been making hand pies for the last few years. Deborah had helped her to develop a great recipe using a secret ingredient. After Ma fried the pies in hot lard and served them, Deborah had a hard time waiting for the little pies to cool before enjoying them. Now that the apples were ready for harvest, her ma would be making more pies, as well as applesauce and apple butter. She sighed as she popped the last bite of pie into her mouth. Ma, she shook her head as she glanced at the oak trees in the distance. Sometimes when Ma spoke to her, she felt like a little kid instead of a 25-year-old woman. Plain spinster. She inwardly winced as she spotted a patch of chicory growing at the side of the road. Maybe she'd stop and pick some on her way back. She was used to the townsfolk in their small Negro community, secretly commenting about her plain looks and her shy nature. Well, she wasn't really shy. She loved being around children, and she enjoyed being the town's schoolteacher. It was adults she didn't take a shine to. Lord, please forgive me for my unkind thoughts. The long ride to the station went by quickly, since she focused on the plants that she spotted along the side of the road. She named them as fast as she could. Just looking at the plants and naming them soothed her. Plants had a way of making her feel better. She figured if she focused on them during her entire journey, she wouldn't be so nervous about seeing Timothy for the first time since her sister's death. She breathed deeply as she reined in the horses at the train station and pulled the brake lever. She removed the pocket watch from her reticule. The train should be coming in soon. She took her satchel and strolled over to the station, scanning the dusty platform as she wiped sweat from her face. There sure were a lot of folks waiting for the train. She eyed several benches around the station. All of the seats were taken, except for one seat on a bench. An elderly white lady and a little boy sat on the long, pew-like seat. The little boy ate a bar of chocolate and wore a fancy black suit. Deborah's leather shoes echoed on the floorboards as she strolled toward the bench. Taking her chances, she plopped down beside the twosome. "Good afternoon, ma'am." The woman narrowed her eyes. The boy simply grinned at her while he enjoyed his candy. She swallowed. She needed to do what was necessary to come up with the money to fulfill her dream. "Ma'am, I see you have a little one with you. I'm a school teacher, and I know how little ones can get runny noses." Quick as could be, she opened her satchel and removed a bottle of her peppermint oil. This is peppermint oil. Folks in the town where I live use this regularly for colds and stomach ailments. We don't need anything like that from your kind. The lady pointed a bony finger at Deborah while she stood and forced the little boy to get down from the bench. The youngster waved at her, giving her a huge smile. The chocolate candy had smeared on his chubby white hand. Don't wave at her. Never wave at a Negro. The elderly woman leaned in close to the child, her loud voice echoing in the train station. She squeezed the boy's wrist and he cried, dropping his candy onto the ground. Deborah shook her head. Foolish woman. It was a terrible shame that just because of her brown skin, the woman didn't want to talk to her about peppermint oil. She scanned the platform. A young Negro man reading a newspaper stood nearby, and a few groups of people congregated with one another. Should she approach somebody else? Maybe the Negro man might be interested? The echo of the whistle from the approaching train pierced the air. She slammed down the lid of her satchel and turned the clasp. She pushed her spectacles up on her nose. The entrance exam for the female college could prove daunting, and if she made it into the college, she'd need enough money to pay her tuition. She still couldn't believe she was studying to take the entrance exam. She'd thought and prayed about it for over a year before making her final decision. If Timothy had been in town when she'd made her decision, she may have shared her news with him. Being around other folks made her bored. Her mind was so cluttered with ideas, questions, and thoughts. She supposed that's why she enjoyed teaching children. She always encouraged questions from her pupils. She'd spent time with Timothy when she was 17, and she hadn't gotten bored. Actually, the opposite had happened. Timothy made her think. Timothy questioned a lot of things, just as she did, and their discussions and debates proved long and fulfilling. The train whistle echoed in the air once more. She again eyed the folks standing on the platform. The Negro man had closed his paper, and he smiled at the approaching train. He was obviously anxious for the train to pull into the station. She sighed and stood up and leaned against the wall. As white puffs of smoke from the train exploded into the warm, humid air, she pressed her hands together, trying to calm her frazzled nerves. She squeezed her eyes shut as the acrid smell of smoke filled the air. She sniffed. Lord, help me. She kept her eyes shut, silently talking to God as she listened to the cadence of pounding footsteps, probably travelers rushing by and folks exiting the train. She sniffed again. Lord, please help me to calm down. Sweat trickled down her brow, irritating her skin. She whisked the moisture away with her hand. It sure was hot out today. Deborah. She knew that deep voice, rich and slow as the molasses she'd used on her flapjacks that morning. She forced herself to open her eyes. Timothy. She was so nervous, his name barely squeaked across her lips. It was a wonder she could speak at all, but something was wrong. His chocolate brown eyes were laced with worry. Daddy. Lily stood beside Timothy. The pretty 7-year-old child looked just like Eve. With Lily's smooth brown skin and pretty face, Deborah predicted Timothy would have no problem finding a husband for his daughter when she grew up. Lily tugged on her father's pants. Her mouth quivered, and tears slid down her cheeks. Deborah's stomach curled with dread as she gently rubbed Lily's back. Lily, what's wrong? I don't feel. The child vomited right onto Deborah's newly polished leather shoes. The sour stench sickened her stomach. Looked like it had been an awful trip for her newly arrived relatives. Chapter 2. Timothy's heart pounded with shame as he lifted his daughter into his arms. He quickly carried her to a patch of grass at the side of the station and set her down just as she vomited again. The awful stench filled his nose as his heart pounded with fear. Lord, please help my Lily. He needed to give her some medicine, maybe some ginger for her upset stomach. After Lily had stopped vomiting, he focused on Deborah, who stood right beside him. He vividly recalled her calm, quiet nature with little ones. She touched his shoulder. There's a water pump out back. Let's take her there. The command flowed from her mouth softly, like a cool dose of spring rain. Beside himself, he needed someone to tell him what to do. Yes, he was a doctor, but when it came to his daughter, he found the dread of worry overshadowing him. He didn't want to make a mistake when treating his daughter like he'd done with Eve. He still blamed himself every day for the sudden death of his wife. Guilt raged deep within him. He tried to pray away the worry and fear that consumed his entire being, but to no avail. And now, with Lily sick, he had no way of knowing what would happen next. He threw the unwelcome thought from his mind as he focused on Deborah again. He needed to clean up Lily. Deborah could help him. Finally, in the midst of this sudden emergency, he managed to find his voice. "Lily, can you walk?" Lily nodded. She clutched her stomach while Deborah held her shoulder, and they made their way over to the water pump. Deborah repeatedly pumped the handle until water gushed from the spigot. He removed his handkerchief from his pocket, and together they cleaned off Lily's dress. Deborah removed her own shoes and held them under the spigot. She washed off the awful stench of Lily's sickness, and then she lifted first one stockinged foot, then the other, under the flow of water. He focused on her slim ankles and slender feet. Their eyes briefly met, and he winced, embarrassed that she'd caught him staring at her ankles. Well, no harm done. He was just a bit beside himself with Lily being sick and all. After she'd cleaned up and placed her drenched shoes back on her feet, she tapped Lily's shoulder. "Hold out your hands." The girl cupped her hands under the spigot, and Deborah pumped water into them. "Drink some water, but don't drink too fast." His daughter's mouth quivered as she sipped water from her cupped hands. She cupped her hands again for more water. Deborah shook her head. "No, just wait a bit." She offered her a vial. "This will make you feel better." Memories, sweet as candy, swept through Timothy's mind. He recalled how Deborah used to make peppermint oil in the wooden shed behind her pa's barn. The time they'd spent together years ago, talking about plants, reading books. He couldn't stop the next word that popped out of his mouth. Peppermint oil. Heals, colds, and stomach pains. As they spoke the sentence together, his heart skipped. Back before he'd started dating Eve, he'd spent a lot of time with Deborah. They'd been good friends. He'd loaned her several books about science and plants, and she'd once confided that he was one of the few men whom she'd befriended in her life who didn't bore her to tears. They'd had a game where they'd memorize herbs and how they were used as remedies. They always started their game by reciting the use of peppermint, probably because they used it so much in their small town. He recalled that after he and Eve married and moved away, Eve told him that Deborah had started selling her peppermint oil to the townsfolk. "Daddy, I want to go home." "We'll be home soon, Lily. We'll be riding in Deborah's wagon to your grandparents' house." Lily shook her head. "No, I want to get back on the train and go home." Well, he couldn't argue with her. Since he'd announced that he'd be taking old Doc Smith's place and they'd be moving to Eve's hometown, his daughter had been moody and upset. She was simply too young to understand that she needed a ma. Eve was gone, and he was sure that Eve's mother, whom he fondly called Mama June, along with Deborah, would be a strong female influence in Lily's life. He didn't know how to be both mother and father to his daughter, and he hoped that Lily would thrive on the extra attention that her female relatives would bestow on her. After Deborah directed them to her horses, he found an old blanket in the back of the wagon. He made a bed for Lily and helped her up into the wagon bed. "Lily, I want you to lie down." He kept his voice gentle as he pointed to the blanket. He then opened up his medicine bag and pulled out his stethoscope. He plugged the device into his ears and placed the base of the stethoscope to Lily's heart. Her strong heartbeat sounded fine. He removed the device and felt her forehead, burning hot. He focused on Deborah. "She has a fever. I'm worried. I have a canteen with me. I'll fill it with water and give her some more peppermint oil later. She can rest while we journey back to my house." Deborah was always so practical and smart. He'd always admired that about her, and had missed the camaraderie they used to share. He felt Lily's forehead again, then spoke to Deborah. When we arrive at your home, you or your ma can give Lily a hot bath if her fever hasn't broken. You want her to sweat, right? Yes. If she starts sweating, that proves her fever has broken. After Deborah filled her canteen with water and returned to the wagon, he gestured toward his daughter. Please stay here with her while I tend to our baggage. He jumped down from the wagon and quickly found two young, dark-skinned porters. They hoisted the baggage onto the back of Deborah's wagon. They didn't have much to bring with them, except for his doctoring supplies and a few clothes. The community here had a small pharmacy downtown, as well as a mercantile. He'd have to order the supplies he needed based upon his new patient's health concerns. He'd not needed to bring a lot of his household supplies with him. Mama June had assured him that Doc Smith had left his furniture and cooking utensils in the cabin. He'd sold or given away most of their belongings before he and Lily moved. He got into the driver's seat of the wagon and eyed Lily, who'd fallen asleep. The child looked so much like her ma that his heart tugged. He missed Eve. If she hadn't died, they wouldn't have had to make such a drastic change in their lives. If only he'd known what to do to save her. Her death was all his fault. Are you all right? Deborah touched his shoulder, her cool fingers making his heated skin feel good. She'd removed her wet shoes and now sat in her wet stocking feet. The faint scent of peppermint surrounded her, again bringing to mind the times they used to share together, studying herbs. Yes, I'm all right. He gestured toward Lily. Just worried about her is all. I don't want her to get sick during the trip home. He took a deep breath. What if she's seriously ill? Deborah's eyes widened. Of course she'll be all right. You, of all people, should know how children get sick sometimes. Not Lily. She tilted her head, staring at him behind her spectacles. What do you mean? Since the day my daughter's been born, she's never been ill. Her mouth dropped open. Never? The disbelief was evident in her voice. Never. She's the healthiest child I've ever known in my entire life. He again glanced at Lily. Her sudden sickness makes me wonder if the Lord's trying to tell me something. Folks bustled around them, hoisting baggage into nearby wagons and carriages. A gentle breeze blew as a loud bird squawked from the sky. He looked up and spotted an eagle swooping through the clouds. He focused on Deborah again. She seemed to be thinking as she toyed with the strings of her bonnet. Memories, sweet as honey, again filled his mind. He recalled Deborah's kind and compassionate nature. She was one to think and measure her words. She never wanted to hurt another person's feelings. Now Eve, she was completely different. Deborah's twin could prove to be conniving, often thinking of herself before others. Yes, he'd loved his wife, still grieved for her, but he needed to be honest with himself. He knew Eve had a few faults he'd often mentioned to her when they had one of their spats. What do you think the Lord's trying to tell you? Maybe I shouldn't have moved back here. Lily is sick for the first time in her life right after we've moved. Don't you think the Lord may be telling me that I should not have returned? He looked at her, the ache to know her opinion burning in his gut like a strong fire. Deborah had always been intelligent. With her strong mind and gentle spirit, he figured she'd tell him if she agreed with him. Heaven help her. She couldn't believe that Timothy was asking her opinion about such a huge change in his life. Of course, the Lord was not trying to tell him that he should not have moved. Didn't he realize that? He stared down at the reins he clutched in his hands. His full, comely lips were mashed together in apparent anger. He appeared to be carrying the weight of the world on his broad shoulders, and the urge to make him feel better swept through her like a strong wind. He was so handsome, a right, nice-looking young man. Since he was 30 and the town's doctor, she imagined he'd be courting an attractive female within weeks. Eve had been dead for a year, so it would be proper for him to remarry now. She knew he wanted her and Ma to help with Lily, but once he got married again, she wouldn't be surprised if he decided to move away and become a doctor somewhere else. No, that wouldn't surprise her one bit. But he'd asked her a question, and she had an answer for him. He was being downright silly. She needed to voice her opinion. Look, Timothy, the Lord is not trying to tell you anything. Lily is obviously upset. You've taken her away from the only home she's ever known. She's not used to living here. His brown eyes pierced her with a long look. Gracious, she could stare into his long-lashed, intense eyes for a good long while. His skin reddened, and he looked away. Goodness, she had been staring at him. She didn't want him to think that she actually enjoyed looking at him. She cleared her throat. Folks get sick riding on a train sometimes, especially if, like Lily, they're not used to it. She's going through an upsetting emotional time right now, and she just needs us to be patient and kind. Eve always told me that Lily was a good child, so we just need to give her some time to get used to her new home. There, she'd said what she could to make him feel better. He appeared to be feeling guilty about moving here, and he shouldn't feel that way at all. All right, I trust your judgment. He trusted her judgment? Was her opinion really that important to him? He touched her hand, and her skin sizzled from his brief touch. She swallowed, ashamed that she enjoyed sitting here in a wagon with him. Ashamed, because he was her dead sister's husband. Thank you, Deborah. Before she could even speak, he flicked the reins and started their journey home. Chapter 3. On the drive home, Timothy kept eyeing Deborah while Lily snoozed in the back of the wagon. His daughter had always been a hard sleeper, and the bumps on the path didn't seem to disturb her slumber. Deborah's wet shoes still sat on the floorboards, and he found himself peeking at her slim ankles. Tall and slim, with that bright red bonnet covering her dark curls, she'd been easy to spot at the station. He'd initially hesitated before approaching her, since her eyes had been closed. She looked lovely. He recalled a few of the gents at the station eyeing Deborah. He'd always wondered why sweet, kind Deborah had never married. The few times he'd asked Eve this, she'd gotten angry. Why, he never could understand. He'd always sensed that Deborah had a bit of a brooding nature, and that she needed a certain sort of man as a husband. Right now, she appeared to be looking at the plants at the side of the road. Again, he recalled the time they used to spend together. He'd caught her staring at him, right before they left the station. But since they'd started their journey, as far as he could tell, she'd not looked at him even once. I noticed you had an entire satchel full of peppermint oil back there. I could smell it. Her stiff shoulders softened, and she looked at him. I was going to try and sell it to folks at the train station, but I didn't have time. I see. So what do you do with the money you earn from selling your peppermint oil? I figure with your teaching salary and your earnings from your oil, well, you must have quite a stash, since you live on the farm with your folks. She pushed her spectacles up on her nose, and her shoulders stiffened again. What I do with my money is my affair. The irritated tone of her voice startled him. He'd obviously offended her. He hadn't meant to do that. Well, if he was going to be living right across the field from her, sharing meals with her family each day, it wouldn't be wise to put her on edge. She had to understand that he wasn't the enemy. He was simply curious. He stopped the wagon. She frowned. What are you doing? We're almost home. Look, Deborah, I just don't want you mad at me is all. You're angry because of my question. I obviously asked you something that was none of my business. Can you forgive me? She looked at him with her wise, pretty eyes. Her hands were pressed together, almost as if she were nervous. She was probably just anxious to get home, to do whatever it was she needed to do. I forgive you. He decided traveling alone with him must be a bit awkward for her, since they weren't actually a couple. Deborah probably wasn't used to taking such a long journey alone with a man other than her pa. He regripped the reins and thought of his new living quarters right near Deborah's home. Mama June had written to him, stating that he and Lily were to share meals with them each day, since he didn't have anybody to cook for him. As he continued to drive the horses, memories exploded in his mind. He recalled when he'd first come to this town to study medicine under Doc Smith. He'd lived with the elderly, widowed doctor. After church one day, he'd spotted Deborah. A lot of the women folk had broken off into groups, talking about, well, whatever women folk talk about. Deborah, however, had gone off by herself, Apparently, she'd been waiting for her Ma, Pa, and Eve to finish their conversations. He'd approached her, wondering what she was looking at in the bushes. She'd been excited about finding some golden seal, and had excitedly shown him the plant with healing properties. She was the first woman he'd met in this town who knew more about plants than just the basics. Once he'd discovered her interest in them, he'd offered to loan her some of the botany books he had on his shelf. Her bright smile and sparkling eyes were evidence that he'd excited her. She'd started asking him questions and sharing how fascinated she was with what she was learning. She'd even showed him how she dried the plants she found, and sometimes used for cooking, as well as curing simple illnesses. His vivid memories continued as they pulled up to the familiar house, right where he used to spend time with Deborah and Eve. It had been a few years since he'd visited, and just seeing the house where Eve grew up comforted him. A bench as well as 2 wooden chairs crowded the small porch. He remembered sitting on that porch, drinking tin cups of cold water. It sure took you all long enough to get back from the train station. Eve's mother, June, and father, Daniel, came out of the house. Mama June peeked into the wagon. That child looks plumb tuckered out. He got out of the wagon and was about to go and assist Deborah, but she scampered out of the wagon so fast he didn't have a chance to help her down. She looked away from him toward the house. She was acting downright skittish. He needed to let her know how much he appreciated her help. Lily got sick at the train station. Deborah helped clean her up and gave her some peppermint oil. Having Deborah's help today was a real blessing. Her pretty eyes widened at his compliment. "Thank you, Timothy." "You're welcome." He carried Lily from the wagon. He felt his daughter's sweaty forehead. Her fever was gone, and he sighed with relief. But even though she didn't have a fever now, he wanted to be sure that he watched her all night, just in case something else ailed her. "Come bring Lily back here." Mama June beckoned him toward the spare room in the rear of the house. He laid Lily on the bed, and Mama June covered her with a quilt. She also removed Lily's shoes. They returned to the kitchen, and he shook hands with Deborah's father. "Good to see you again, Papa Daniel." The bald old man grinned before pulling him into a hug. "Lily looks just like Eve. I felt like I was looking at my little girl all over again." His voice wavered, and he took a deep breath before wiping his suddenly wet eyes. "I still miss her." Timothy touched Papa Daniel's shoulder. "So do I. I think about her every day, especially when I see Lily." Deborah stood to the side, watching them, but she didn't say a word. She finally gestured toward the kitchen. "Dinner's ready. Ma wants you to come and eat." The scent of cooked meat and herbs filled the air. The table was laden with all kinds of food. He spotted the roast beef, swimming in gravy. Mashed potatoes filled a large bowl, and biscuits were piled high on a plate. There were also bowls of vegetables, as well as a small crock of butter. He eyed the plate of Mama June's apple hand pies for dessert. He eased into a chair, and Deborah sat to his right. As soon as Deborah's parents were seated, they joined hands. It was a tradition in Eve's family. Deborah's hand felt warm and soft, and the light scent of peppermint wafted toward him. Papa Daniel cleared his throat. "Lord, thanks so much for this lovely day. Thank you also for this wonderful food to nourish our bodies. Also, Lord, I want to thank you for allowing Timothy and Lily a safe journey. We've missed our family, and we're oh so happy for the blessing of seeing them again. Please help Lily heal from her illness. Please be with Timothy as he becomes acclimated as the town's doctor. Amen. Amen." Everybody uttered the word before they started to eat. When Timothy tasted the rich, tender meat and the creamy whipped potatoes, he felt like he was eating a slice of heaven. "This is delicious, Mama June." "Thank you, Timothy." He eyed his father-in-law as he spread apple butter onto a biscuit. "How have you been, Papa Daniel?" "Humph. Busy. Apples are about ready for harvest. I've a lot of chores to do. I might hire a couple of folks to help pick the apples." He glanced at Mama June. "June will be storing lots of apples in our root cellar, and she'll be making applesauce and apple butter. Sounds like your farm is doing well. I'm glad to hear that you're having such a plentiful season." After they'd eaten their dinner, Timothy stood up. If it's okay with you, Mama June and Papa Daniel, I want Lily to stay in the spare room here tonight. I don't want to move her home. I'm going to sit up with her. Deborah looked at him. Lily is fine. Why don't you go to your new home, and Ma and I will stay up with her? He shook his head. No, I want to sit up with her. I can't leave her, not when she's sick. He refused to allow them to argue with him. Lily had a simple stomach upset. Why was Timothy acting as if she had some kind of dreaded disease? She'd probably be fine in the morning. These thoughts twirled through Deborah's mind like leaves scattered in the wind. It had been 2 hours since dinner time, and Pa had gone up the road to Doc Smith's cabin, which was now Timothy and Lily's cabin. Timothy wanted Pa to bring back the box of medical notes for all of Doc Smith's patients. He had explained that he needed to start his doctoring duties right away, so he wanted to go through the files while he sat up with Lily. He had pen and inkwell in the room too. He'd set up a workstation, claiming he'd start making trips to his patients the following morning, and that he also needed to go downtown to the pharmacy. Eve had been dead for a year. Perhaps it had been a while since a woman had given him advice. She pulled a chair into the room where he worked. Lily continued to sleep, her soft snores filling the small space. Deborah plopped into the chair as Timothy mumbled to himself, reading through the files. Timothy, He didn't even look up from his task. Why don't you get some rest tonight? We have a mattress we can bring in here so that you can keep an eye on Lily. He still didn't look at her, just kept looking through his files. No, I have to get started making patient visits tomorrow. He speared her with one of his intense looks. I told you that earlier. But you're tired. Lily is sick. You've had a long journey. Some of the neighbors probably saw us when we were driving home. I figure everybody knows you're back in town, so they know where to find you if they need you. He shook his head. Stubborn. That's what he was. Would it hurt to lie down and get some rest for a few hours? Well, she wasn't going to sit and try to reason with him. Perhaps Ma or Pa could talk some sense into him. Why is it so important for you to do this now? You can always do this tomorrow. He speared her with another look, his lips mashed together. He sighed and finally put his pen aside. Deborah, the answer is obvious. I don't want anybody to die. Chapter 4. Timothy's fervent words haunted Deborah as she stood on the top step of the schoolhouse the following morning. She tried to talk to him about getting some rest. However, he'd told her to leave him alone so he could work. Both Ma and Pa had approached him as well, and they'd not been able to get him to sleep either. He'd been like a machine of a man, on a mission, not listening to any of them. She shook her head. How in the world did Eve ever reason with him? The intense way he'd focused on his task had worried her, so she'd stayed up with him, making tea and helping with Lily, who awakened a few times throughout the night. About an hour before her Ma and Pa had gone to bed, she'd had a customer come to the door. One of their neighbors had twin toddlers with runny noses, and they purchased 2 vials of peppermint oil. Deborah had been glad to get the money from the sale. Timothy was unaware of the visitor. He'd been so intent on his task. She hadn't mentioned it to him, because that might cause him to pry and ask questions that were none of his business. Still thinking about Timothy's overly strong work ethic, she held the school bell tightly in her grip and blinked her eyes. She yawned, exhausted. Lord, please help me stay awake on this first day of school. She breathed deeply before enjoying the soft rustle of the multicolored leaves as they fell from the surrounding trees. A gentle wind blew as she took another deep breath. Children congregated around the schoolyard. Some of the older ones stood in a group, laughing and talking. Those were her 8th graders, and it would be their last year in her school. Once this school year was completed, they would probably be helping their parents on their farms year-round. The younger children had joined hands and were skipping in a circle, and their loud laughter sounded joyful on this beautiful late summer day. A loud scream rippled through the air quick as a whip, interrupting the children's banter. Deborah's heart skipped as she dropped the school bell, and it clanged on the steps as she rushed down the stairs. Another scream pierced the air as she ran, fast as she could, to a child lying on the ground, crying and holding her arm. The girl couldn't have been more than 5 years old, a child new to her classroom. Tears streamed from her large chocolate-brown eyes as she screamed again. "Let me see your arm, honey." Deborah sat beside the child and made sure her voice was gentle and soothing. The girl was obviously hurt and frightened, so she needed to help her as best she could. But she couldn't help her until she could determine what was wrong. The child started shaking. "No, it hurts too much. I'm going to help you, honey." She rubbed the child's hand until she released it from her arm. A bee sting. The poor child's dark skin swelled with the venom. She needed to take fast action. "Hold her down." The command flew from Deborah's mouth. Quick as could be, 2 of the older girls held the child as Deborah removed the stinger. The little girl's scream of pain pierced the air. Deborah's gut churned with dread. "Lord, please help me." She eyed a patch of wild basil nearby. "Thank you, Jesus." She tore the leaves from the plant and stuffed them into her mouth. She gestured to the children who held the hurt girl to release her. Deborah chewed before spitting the leaves into her hand and smoothing them over the poor child's arm. Miraculously, in a few minutes, the girl stopped crying. "What's your name?" Deborah kept her voice soft, low, and hopefully compelling as she took more leaves, shoved them into her mouth, and chewed again. "Abigail." The child had relaxed, which was a relief. Again, Deborah spit the leaves into her hand and pressed them onto the girl's injured skin. "I hear the new doc came to town yesterday. Maybe one of us can go fetch him." One of the older boys made the suggestion. Now that was a good idea. However, it was a bit of a walk, and she figured it would be best if one of the children simply took Abigail over to Timothy instead. Thankfully, the child seemed better. Deborah focused on her. "The new doctor is at my house with his daughter." She needed to be sure they went to the right place. "Lindsay, you take Abigail over to my house and tell the doctor what happened." Lindsay was one of her older students, and she had proven herself to be trustworthy. 12-year-old Lindsay scrunched her nose. "Who's the new doctor?" "His name is Dr. Washington. Now go, take Abigail on over to my house. After that, take her home, and then you can come back to school." Within minutes, the twosome slowly strolled down the wooded path toward her home. Abigail was speaking to Lindsay, so it appeared that the child would be fine. But now it looked like she'd be missing 2 students for the first day of school. The children had started talking again, their mumbling filling the air. She needed to bring some order to these restless students. It was the first day of school and she needed to get started. She quickly marched over to the steps and found her bell lying on the ground, right where she'd abandoned it when she'd gone to assist Abigail. She needed to get the children's minds off of the bee sting and back onto school. She pushed her spectacles up on her nose, then raised her bell and shook it back and forth. The loud, familiar clang made her heart skip with joy. The wonderful sound echoed all around them as the children quickly gathered their dinner pails and other belongings from the ground and scampered into the school. One of the younger boys stopped and tugged at her skirt. "Miss King, we don't need no new town doctor. The way you fixed up Abigail, they should make you the new doctor." Deborah stifled her laughter, not even bothering to correct the child's grammar. She highly doubted they'd take a female doctor seriously in this small town. Each child greeted her as they entered the building. A few of the female students even hugged her. She knew the boys wouldn't want to share a hug. That was no surprise. She'd seen a lot of the students during the summer, but a number of them who lived a bit farther out and who seldom attended church, she'd not encountered since school let out last spring. The echo of the children's footsteps surrounded her as they entered the schoolroom. As soon as the last child had entered, she closed the door and walked to the front of the room. She set her bell on her desk and scanned the children who sat on the wooden benches. The benches, the floor, and even the windows gleamed from the sunshine spilling into the room. The tangy scent of lemon oil tickled her nose. She mentally thanked the church ladies who'd volunteered to clean up the room before the first day of school. Well, it was unfortunate that Abigail had gotten stung by a bee, but one good thing had come of it. The incident had left her wide awake. She was no longer exhausted from her long night of sitting up with Timothy and Lily. "Good morning, everyone." "Good morning." The echo of the students' voices filled the room. It sure was nice to be back into the routine of school. For those of you who don't know, my name is Miss King. Taking a piece of chalk, she wrote her name on the blackboard. Does anyone remember how we start our day? Several of her pupils raised their hands. Rebecca, the young girl, grinned. Looked like she'd lost a few of her baby teeth over the summer. "We start the day with the Lord's Prayer." Deborah smiled. That's right. She wanted to instill a deep faith within all of her students, and reciting the Lord's Prayer every day was important to her. As I say to you every year, if you don't know what to say to Jesus and have a hard time finding the right words, just say the Lord's Prayer. Jesus knows what's in your heart. She knew that sometimes it took time for the children to learn to be honest with God in saying their prayers, so she hoped knowing this simple prayer would help them with their prayer life and faith as they grew older. She focused on the few new young pupils sitting in the front row. I realize that some of you may not know the Lord's Prayer by heart. One of the youngsters raised her hand. "What's by heart mean?" Deborah smiled at the girl. "From memory." She then focused on the entire class again. "So let's begin by reciting the Lord's Prayer together. I want all of you to bow your heads and close your eyes." She bowed her head. "Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread." The smooth, gentle cadence of young voices raising a prayer to God lifted her spirits. As they finished the prayer, Deborah felt renewed. She'd been a bit tense and uneasy that morning due to Timothy and Lily's recent arrival and from Abigail's sudden bee sting. As she opened her eyes, she felt right nice, almost as if angels were smiling down on the classroom. Her eyes teared with happiness. She quickly blinked them away, not wanting the students to see her get emotional. She smiled at her students. "Doesn't that feel nice, speaking to Jesus first thing in the morning?" "Yes, ma'am," the children responded. "When's Abigail coming back?" One of the younger students sitting in the front row voiced the question. "Abigail should be fine after she sees the doctor. I suspect she'll be back to school tomorrow." She paused and took a deep breath. "Could all of you in the back come up here to help the new students, please?" The 8th graders in the back of the room came to the front of the classroom. She gave them the primers for the younger students. "I want you to start going over the alphabet with the new students who've not yet been to school." She wanted to be sure her young pupils could read simple words before the school year ended. As the 8th graders obediently started working with the youngest students, she gave assignments to the next few groups of students to work on. She then focused on the middle grades by showing them how to do long division. The children stood at the blackboard while she outlined how to solve an equation. She patiently answered their questions. She realized it was tough for some students to learn adequately, since a lot of them missed school during harvest time or if they were ill. After the students had been working for a while, Deborah clapped her hands. She knew it would be hard for them to concentrate for long periods of time on the first day. Realizing the new students likely didn't know all of the children in the classroom, she thought it was best to rectify that. "Why don't we go around the room and introduce ourselves? If you'd like, you can tell me what you did over the summer." She figured the suggestion would help the children ease into the routine of school again. As the children introduced themselves, she sat at her desk and tried to listen to them as best she could. "Lord, forgive me for my wandering mind, but I'm just worried about Timothy." Timothy had slept in a chair beside Lily's bed. It had been strange, having somebody sleep in Eve's bed. Since her twin had gotten married and moved away 8 years ago, her bed had remained empty. Earlier that morning, Timothy had woken up, looking relieved when he noticed that Lily seemed much better. Ma had told him to stay for the day while she helped care for Lily. Timothy. She still didn't understand his strange reaction to Lily's illness. Why would he react so strongly, almost fearfully? Because Lily had a simple, upset stomach. Kind of hard to believe that her niece had never taken ill before, but he'd been so upset. The urge to rub his strong shoulders and tell him that everything would be okay had swelled deep within her. "Miss King, are you all right?" John, the oldest student in her class, asked the question from the back of the room, and she realized the children had gone quiet, waiting for her to call on the next child. "I'm fine, John." She gestured for the children to continue their introductions as she continued to dwell on the previous night's events. She'd wanted to comfort Timothy but knew it wasn't a good idea to do so. Heaven help her. She still found him as attractive now as she had when she'd been 17 and he'd been an apprentice to Dr. Smith. His beige skin and expressive light brown eyes, his strong shoulders, and his voice. Comforting him was not something she needed to think about. Besides, Timothy was interfering with her thoughts in a negative way. Since Timothy had arrived and Lily had gotten sick, and they'd unexpectedly had to spend the night at her house, she hadn't taken time to study for her college entrance exam the previous night. She studied for that exam every night. She just couldn't fall behind with her studying routine. She was a 25-year-old spinster, and these children in her classroom would be the closest she'd ever come to being a ma. Since she'd never have any kids of her own, nor ever have a husband, she could do what she wanted. She wanted to earn a botany certificate from the Women's College in Pennsylvania. Being a Negro woman, she knew it would be hard for some folks to accept that she had an education, but she didn't care. Learning was what she did best, and her active, inquisitive mind had discouraged the few suitors she'd ever had in her life. "Miss King?" John spoke up again. She eyed the classroom and noticed the expectant look on their young faces. Oh, goodness. She'd been daydreaming about Timothy again and had completely forgotten to pay attention to her classroom. They'd obviously finished their introductions and were awaiting her next words. Gracious. Timothy was already wreaking havoc in her life, and he'd been in town less than a day. After she spent the rest of the morning going over some of the basic lessons that each group of students had learned the previous year, her stomach growled for dinner. Thank you, Jesus. Time to stop teaching for an hour, while the children enjoyed their midday meal. She could eat the cold, fried chicken and apples she'd packed for her lunch while she studied her botany book. She'd tucked it away in the top drawer of her desk so that she could catch up on her studying. She stood up. Dinner time. The students scampered from their desks to retrieve their dinner pails for nooning. Some of them got into groups she'd noticed last year that some of them traded dinners. She placed her food on top of her desk and opened her drawer to retrieve her botany book. She blinked as her stomach curled with dread. The book was gone, and she knew she'd left it there this morning. Where was it? She closed her eyes and balled her hands into fists. Anger, thick as the pea soup her ma made every spring, bubbled within her. She scanned her classroom. All of the students were gobbling their dinner. Some sat at their desks, while others were outside in groups. He that is slow to wrath is of great understanding, but he that is hasty of spirit exalteth folly. Proverbs 14:29 popped into her mind. She stared at the cold fried chicken and apples laid out on her desk. Since her precious book was missing, she'd lost her appetite. Which of her students could have taken her book? Was this some kind of prank to pull on the teacher on the first day of school? Chapter 5. Timothy strolled toward Deborah's house, holding Lily's hand. He'd managed to get settled into his cabin that day, and Lily had made a full recovery from her stomach illness. It was supper time, and he and Lily were on their way to Mama June and Papa Daniel's for their meal. As they continued toward the house, he thought about his first day back in town. He'd gone through all of the patient files that Doc Smith had left behind, and even visited a few of his elderly patients. He'd been thorough as he questioned his new patients, making sure he understood the full breadth of their illnesses. He was determined to make this town as healthy as possible. Smells of apples and cooked meat filled the air. His mouth watered as they approached the door and opened it. Mama June had mentioned to him earlier that he was family and did not need to knock when coming over for supper. Mama June and Deborah barely spoke to them as they bustled around the kitchen. They set the food on the table, but he noticed that Papa Daniel wasn't around. "Where's Papa Daniel?" Mama June grunted as she set a bowl of potatoes on the table. "He's sick. I think he got that stomach illness from Lily." Timothy's mouth dropped open. "Why didn't you come get me?" Fear seeped into his gut. What if Papa Daniel were seriously ill? Mama June shooed away his concern. "We know he'll be fine come tomorrow morning. He couldn't do the barn chores, so Deborah and I will have to do them after supper." Timothy left Lily in the middle of the kitchen and rushed back to his home. He returned with his medical bag and rushed into Papa Daniel and Mama June's room. "Papa Daniel?" The older man slowly opened his eyes. Sweat beaded his brow. "Hello, Timothy. Mama June said you're sick. I'm going to examine you." Timothy removed his stethoscope and checked the older man's heartbeat. He then checked his eyes and made him open his mouth. "Are you thirsty?" "Yes." A pitcher of water rested on the table. Timothy poured a cupful, and the old man took a few sips. Timothy nodded. "That's right. Drink it slowly. You don't have a fever. I figure you'll be fine tomorrow or the day after that. If you need me, just send Mama June to come get me." "Thank you," the older man grunted before falling back to sleep. Timothy touched his shoulder, then squeezed his hand. "Lord, please help Papa Daniel to heal. Amen." He loved both Papa Daniel and Mama June. They were like a second set of parents to him. He'd lost both of his parents to illness when he'd been barely a teen, and that was when the desire to become a doctor bloomed within him. His folks had been wealthy, so he'd used his inheritance to attend college and study medicine. When he moved to this town and was mentored by Doc Smith, he'd gotten to know and respect Eve's parents. If they ever needed his help for anything, he wanted them to be sure they could ask him. He finally entered the kitchen again, and his mouth watered when he eyed the food. As they sat for supper, he glanced at Deborah. Something was wrong with her. Her pretty mouth drooped and her shoulders were tense. She barely spoke during the entire meal. He needed to find out what was wrong. Perhaps there was something he could do to help. Today was the first day of the school term, so he wondered if the children had misbehaved. After supper, he stood up and focused directly on Mama June. "Mama June, I'm going to leave Lily here with you to help clean up the supper dishes. Deborah, I'll help you do the chores since your pa is sick." "Thank you, Timothy." She didn't look at him or speak to him during their quick trek to the barn. After he carried the water to the house so that Mama June and Lily could start the dishes, he focused on the barn chores. He helped Deborah feed the horses, stealing glances at her the entire time. She then milked the cow and fed the chickens. She barely paid him any attention as they fetched water for the horses. While he'd visited patients around town that morning, he'd heard talk that Deborah had been selling a lot of her peppermint oil. He took a deep breath, anxious to figure out what was making her so sad this evening. "Deborah, what's wrong?" He set his pitchfork against the wall and focused on her. She bristled. "What makes you think something is wrong? I can tell by the way you look. You're upset. Why don't you tell me what's wrong? Maybe I can help." She shook her head as she set her watering pail on the ground. "I'm not sick, so I doubt there's anything you can do to help me." Stubborn woman. He figured she just didn't want to tell him what was wrong. From what he'd been able to gather on his first day back, it appeared that Deborah was still a loner. He'd not heard of any of the female folk in town being close friends with her. Her ma was fussing about that earlier in the day while he'd been at her house. She said Deborah spent too much time by herself, and that's why she'd never gotten married. "I know you're not sick. Deborah, we used to be friends back before you married Eve." The words tumbled from her mouth like hard pebbles. She sounded angry, and for the life of him, he couldn't understand why. "Yes, before I married Eve." He paused and looked directly at her. "Why don't you tell me what's wrong? Did something happen at school today?" Her mouth dropped open as she pushed her spectacles up on her nose. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes. She was probably praying, wondering if she could trust him. She finally opened her eyes and beckoned him over to the adjoining room. He recalled that was where she kept her peppermint oil. She pulled out a couple of wooden crates. She touched his hand. "I'm sorry, Timothy. I'm very upset right now. I'm acting angry towards you, and you're just trying to help. Please forgive me. I forgive you. But it might help if you tell me what's wrong. All right. She gestured toward the crates. Please, sit down. Her voice sounded tired and weary. He sat on an empty crate, and the old wood creaked beneath his weight. She eased onto the crate beside him. A black cat scurried into the room. Come here, Susie. The cat scampered onto her lap, and she stroked the cat's shiny dark fur. The animal's gentle purr sounded soothing. He stared at her long, slim, gentle-looking hands while she petted her cat. Remember when you were asking me what I did with my teaching salary and with the money I was making from my peppermint oil? Yes? She sighed. The urge to take her hand bubbled within him. No, he couldn't do that. He reached over and scratched the cat's neck, and the animal purred even louder. Maybe if he showed some kindness to her cat, she'd confide in him. Deborah smiled just a little bit when he touched her pet. I've been saving my money for a while now. I want to go to the women's college and get a certificate in botany. Deborah, that's wonderful. She was one of the smartest women he'd ever known. Do you really think so? She actually grinned, as if pleased that he agreed with her ambition. Yes. I know some men are against women learning at college, but not me. I think you'll do well there. Oh, Timothy! The joy in her voice filled the small room. She jumped up, forcing the cat to scamper away, and hugged him. Have mercy. She couldn't believe she'd hugged Timothy. His muscled arms were hard as rocks, and when he hugged her back, it was the first time a man had ever hugged her, besides Pa. Wait, she couldn't make a fool of herself. She didn't want Timothy to know she still found him attractive after all these years. She quickly plopped back onto the wooden crate and folded her hands. He touched her shoulder, apparently wanting to put her at ease. Deborah, it's all right that you hugged me. I can tell you're excited about going to the women's college. Every time Timothy spoke in his deep, strong voice, her insides turned to mush. She figured she didn't have the same effect on him, but that was all right. She needed a friend in whom to confide right now, and if that person happened to be Timothy, then so be it. Perhaps that was why the Lord placed him in her path at this time. I don't understand. Why does your going to the women's college make you upset? Oh, just being around this man was hampering her ability to think clearly. She'd failed to tell him what had happened in her classroom earlier that day. One of my students stole my botany book for the exam. I need it to study. He narrowed his eyes. Are you sure somebody stole it? Was she sure? What kind of question was that? Sure, she'd been a bit on edge since Timothy and Lily arrived, but she knew for a fact she'd taken the book with her to school that morning, and she needed Timothy to understand that. She pulled her crate from underneath the table, removed the loose hay from the top, and lifted a thin book from it. This is the study manual for the women's college. It outlines what I need to review for the exam. Most of the science that I need to know is in my botany book. I usually keep the book in this crate and study out here. I find it nice and peaceful, being out here while I study about plants. I took the botany book with me to school this morning and left it in the top drawer of my desk. She put the book back in the crate. I know when my students have been up to mischief. She paused and licked her lips. I talked to them about the value of honesty and truthfulness this afternoon. I told them that Jesus doesn't take kindly to stealing, even if it's a prank. Hopefully what I said will have some impact on them, and the guilty person who took my book will return it. So, when do you think one of your students could have taken the book? She pressed her hands together. She'd been thinking about this since dinner time, and she had a good theory as to what had happened. Did Abigail come see you earlier? You're talking about the little girl with the bee sting? She sure did. You did an excellent job of removing the stinger from her arm. I smelled the basil on her skin. I gave her some ointment before sending her home. Lily was here, and she started chatting with Abigail. He paused before looking directly at her with his kind brown eyes. I haven't heard Lily talk so much since Eve died. She seemed quite taken with Abigail. He shrugged. Hopefully, they can become friends in school. That'd be a blessing for sure. She paused. The reason I mentioned the bee sting is I was thinking that one of my pupils may have taken my book as a prank while I was tending to Abigail. Most of the class was focused on helping Abigail, as was I. It would have been easy for someone to take the book then. Deborah, let me help you. I can talk to your class. Was he serious? Timothy, I appreciate your offer to help. Honestly, I do, but I can handle my own classroom. I've been teaching school for years, and I know how to make the culprit come forward soon enough. At least she hoped her book would turn up soon. What's the matter? You're frowning again. I don't want to fall behind. I feel like this is my calling, deep in my gut. As clear as the sun shines in the sky and the birds sing from the trees, I think the Lord wants me to attend the women's college. Not having my book is affecting my calling, and that bothers me. I understand. Let me help you study. Remember how we used to spend time together, looking at my books about the healing power of plants? And then we'd go look at the plants in the fields? You have a quick, active mind, and we work well together. She winced. Now, how in the world would she manage to do that? If she started spending time with Timothy, studying plants, well, she'd probably end up falling in love with him all over again, and she just didn't think that was a good idea. Not at all. He'd never fall for a plain woman like herself. Sure, she was probably a great match for him as a study partner. She could probably even help him while he tended patients sometimes, just like she used to help Doc Smith occasionally, but she couldn't imagine spending time with him without getting emotionally involved. Or could she? He lifted the study manual out of the crate and flipped through it. This is a good women's college, and since it's only a few miles away, you wouldn't need to leave home to attend. He took a deep breath. I know some of the professors over there. One of my old classmates teaches there. I think I may have a good idea what the exam will be like. Let me help you study, Deborah. Oh, Lord, what have I gotten myself into now? Let me think about it, all right. His mouth drooped, and he narrowed his eyes. He was upset that she hadn't accepted his offer. Did he really want to study with her that badly? He stood up and gestured toward her house. All right, I need to fetch Lily. It's getting late, and she needs to go to bed. They were quiet as they walked together toward the house. He barely skimmed his fingers on her back as he opened the door for her and let her enter the house first. Her skin burned from the brief contact of his fingers. Lily sat at the kitchen table, reading one of the primers Deborah used to teach her younger students. Her ma was putting away the clean dishes. About time the two of you got back from doing the chores. Lily should be ready to go to bed soon. Timothy smiled at Lily before focusing on Ma. I was just trying to convince Deborah to allow me to help her study for the entrance exam for the women's college. Deborah whipped her head around to glare at Timothy just as her ma dropped a dish. It clattered to the floor. She dropped her head into her hands. How awful! She'd been so enamored of spending time with Timothy that she'd completely forgotten to tell him that her ma and pa didn't know about her future plans. Her ma would probably do everything she could to prevent her from attending college. She just couldn't stay in this room right now. She opened the door and rushed outside. Deborah. Ma called her name so loudly Deborah reckoned just about half the town could hear her. She ignored it. She just didn't feel like talking to Ma tonight about her dream of attending college. Hard footsteps pounded behind her. Someone grabbed her arm, and she whipped around and looked into Timothy's gorgeous eyes. He reached for her hand. Why didn't you tell me your ma didn't know? She couldn't tell him that being alone with him in the barn, just seeing his handsome face and caring nature, made her forget her common sense. I forgot to tell you it was a secret. Heaven help her. She wished that this one time she hadn't been so infatuated with Timothy's nearness that she lost her presence of mind. If being around Timothy made her forget to tell him about the secret she'd hidden from her ma and pa, then maybe studying with him for the exam was a bad idea. What if she was so distracted by his handsome face that she couldn't memorize the information? Deborah, I'm sorry. If there's anything I can do. He frowned as he finally released her hand. Her hand felt warm, and she didn't want him to let it go. She blew air through her lips. This just wouldn't work. Not at all. Timothy, I've made up my mind. I don't think it's a good idea for you to help me study. This is something I need to do on my own. Chapter 6. Deborah pulled the pan of hot biscuits from the oven. Her ma set the jar of molasses and the plate of butter on the table. The oatmeal was about done, and Timothy and Lily were due for breakfast soon. Deborah, let's sit and talk for a minute. Her ma frowned as she pointed toward a kitchen chair. When Timothy had left with Lily the previous night, he'd been confused. She remembered the way he used to look whenever he was trying to figure something out. He was probably wondering why she'd turned down his offer to help. Well, she wasn't sure if it was a good idea to explain her reasoning to him. His light brown eyes had been intense and sad when he'd said goodbye. She glanced at Ma and shook her head. Her ma would never understand what she was going through. How could she? Timothy and Lily will be here for breakfast soon. We have a few minutes. Sit down. Deborah plopped into the seat, and her ma sat beside her. 2 tin cups of hot coffee rested on the table in front of them. The chicory smell of the brew soothed her. She took a sip. The hot coffee felt good going down her parched throat. Thank goodness Pa was feeling better this morning and was still out doing chores. She didn't think she'd have the energy to discuss this with both of her parents at the same time. Her ma didn't really sound angry, but she didn't sound happy either. Deborah closed her eyes. Lord, I love my ma. Please give me the right words to explain this to her. Help her understand why I need to do this. Amen. Ma folded her hands together. Now, would you care to explain to me why you want to go to the women's college? You know it's best if you simply teach school. You should know that a smart woman can make a man feel uneasy. Tell the truth. The words filled her gut, her soul. She needed to let Ma know how she felt. Lord, please don't let Ma get angry with me. Ma, I don't believe I'll ever get married. I'm 25, I'm smart, and I want to help people. Not all people are called to get married. Remember the Apostle Paul spoke about that in the Bible? This has nothing to do with the Apostle Paul. Yes, it does. You know how I try to live my life by following Jesus. The Apostle Paul talks about not being married. I'm an unmarried woman, and when I read Corinthians, I feel like God is giving me advice about being an unmarried lady. Ma, I'm not pretty like Eve. I know you're ashamed of me. You're proud that Eve got a husband and had a child, and it bothers you that I didn't do either of those things. Ma grabbed her hand. I'm not ashamed. Deborah pulled her hand away. Yes, you are. She wiped her suddenly sweaty hands on her dress. She just couldn't sit. She stood up and paced the kitchen. She just had to make Ma understand how she felt. She stopped walking and turned toward her mother. Ma, I'm tall, skinny, and plain. I hear what folks in town say about me. I can't help it if God made Eve beautiful and talkative, and he made me quiet and plain. I think God wants me to study botany. I love plants. I made the decision to attend the college a year ago, shortly after Eve died. Oh, you know I love you, Deborah. I'm not ashamed of you. You made this decision right after your sister died? Honey, maybe you should pray about this. She rushed to her seat and sat back down. But Ma, I have prayed about this. Please, listen to me. She swallowed another sip of coffee. I've been hoarding my teaching salary and the money from my peppermint oil so that I can go to college. I've been studying out in my room behind the barn. That's the secret I've been hiding from you. Oh, Deborah. Oh, no. Ma was crying. She swiped her tears away. I just don't know what to say. This news isn't sad. It's a joy. I help people with my plants. You know this. It's my calling. I can feel it deep in my bones. She paused. Think about all the folks I've helped so far. Just think about what I could do, what the Lord could allow me to do if I went to college to study about plants. Honey, I don't know about this. The door swung open, the rusty hinges creaking. Timothy stood in the doorway, holding Lily's hand. The sunlight splashed onto him, highlighting his good looks. She certainly could get used to seeing him in her kitchen every morning. His eyes pierced right through her. She gulped and pressed her hands together. "Good morning." He spoke the words to both her and Ma, but he looked directly at her. "Good morning." Thank God she didn't sound as nervous as she felt. "Daddy, aren't we going to go in?" Lily tugged at her father's hand. "Come on over here, honey." Ma beckoned to Lily. The girl hugged her grandma before hugging Deborah. He glanced at her and her ma. It wouldn't surprise her if he realized they'd been in the middle of a serious discussion. Pa strolled through the open doorway, and they all took a seat at the table. After they'd said grace and enjoyed bowls of hot oatmeal laced with milk, butter, and molasses, and had consumed the hot biscuits and coffee, Timothy wiped his mouth with a napkin and stood up. He looked at Deborah, surprising her with his warm smile. "Since this is Lily's first day at school, I thought I'd walk the two of you to the schoolhouse and make sure she gets settled in properly." Whoa, she didn't want the students to see them strolling together to school. Some of her students would mistakenly think he was her beau, wouldn't they? She pushed the thought from her mind. Timothy was Lily's father, and it wouldn't raise suspicion for him to accompany his daughter to class for her first day of school. She was worrying for nothing. "Fine, let me get my things." After she'd gathered her dinner pail and placed her school books in her satchel, she tied her bonnet on her head and stepped outside. Timothy strolled down the wooded path beside her. The strong scent of soap and hay wafted from him as they walked down the path. Lily skipped ahead of them. Timothy turned and looked at her. "Is your ma still upset?" "Yes." She took a deep breath as he focused on the trees for a few seconds. The sun splashed from the vivid blue sky as puffy white clouds moved in the heavens. A right beautiful day, but she'd enjoy it more if she didn't have so much on her mind. She wasn't mad, but a bit sad because she doesn't understand. She didn't want to confide to Timothy all that she'd discussed with her ma that morning. "But you're still going to college?" The urgency in his tone made her pause. He really wanted her to fulfill her dreams. She could hear it in his voice. She finally nodded as they approached the schoolhouse. "Yes, even if Ma and Pa object, I'm still going. As long as I pass the entrance exam and I have enough money, I'll go." He stopped walking. Lily had run toward the schoolhouse when she spotted her new friend Abigail. The twosome held hands as they picked wildflowers. "Then let me help you study," he said. "Do you think the folks in town will gossip if they discover that we're spending time together? Are you afraid that it may be upsetting for you and your family since I'm Eve's widower?" Truth be told, she did feel a bit unsettled about spending so much time alone with her sister's husband. Every time she looked at Lily, she was reminded of her sister's beauty and charm. She sighed. She was highly bothered by her attraction to him. She didn't want him to know the real reason she hesitated. She liked him, plain and simple, but she couldn't let him know that. "No, I don't think the folks in town would gossip. Well, from what I've heard, most college entrance exams are hard. I know mine was. Let me help you. I've often heard that some folks have to take the exam multiple times before they are admitted to college." She widened her eyes and pushed her spectacles up on her nose. She hadn't realized that the exam would be that hard. Could she really ignore her strong attraction to Timothy while he assisted her in studying for the exam? "Lord, can I do this? Should I do this?" She glanced at the children playing in the schoolyard. "All right." He grinned, giving her a nice view of his perfect white teeth. Heaven help her. Timothy was even more attractive when he smiled. She needed to be sure he understood something. "We can study together for a little while, if I find that I study better on my own." His eyes sparkled with warmth. "Deborah, if my studying with you causes a problem, then we can stop. Deal?" "Deal." They shook hands. Her slender hand was dwarfed in his large one, and he continued to smile as they strolled toward the schoolhouse. Surprisingly, he walked up the steps with her into the building. He even escorted her to her desk. She then opened the top drawer of her desk and saw her book. "Timothy, look, my book is here." She pulled the book out of the drawer and found a note of apology tucked inside. The crudely scrawled note had obviously been penned by one of her younger students. There was no signature, but she didn't care. She was just glad that she had her book back. "Deborah, that's wonderful. We can start studying together tonight after supper." As she watched Timothy walk away from the schoolhouse, she hoped she was making the right decision. Chapter 7. Class is dismissed. She grinned when her pupils whooped as they retrieved their dinner pails and the rest of their belongings. She was so glad it was Friday evening, and the first 2 weeks of school were officially over. She'd spent the afternoon teaching the children arithmetic by splitting them into groups for a game. Each group took their turn at the chalkboard, and the one in the group who figured out the answer to the question first won the round. Then the winners from each group competed against each other. It had proven to be a great way to spend a Friday afternoon with her pupils. They'd been restless, anxious for the weekend break. She'd also encouraged them to start studying plants, if they wished. She had some old canning jars on the windowsill. She'd filled the jars with water, and the children could bring in any plants they thought were interesting. She would then find the names of the plants in her botany book. It would be good for the children to know the names of the different plants that grew around their town. "Are you ready?" Timothy entered her classroom and gave her a warm smile. She smiled back at him. "Yes, just give me a minute to gather my things." "Hi, Daddy." Lily hugged her father. Over the last couple of weeks, Lily had been shy but was slowly making friends. So far, she seemed to get along well with Abigail, and that was refreshing. Deborah had been worried about her when she'd initially started school, but now she seemed to be settling in quite well. "Hello, Lily." He kissed his daughter's cheek before approaching Deborah at the desk. Oh, how she wished he'd kiss her on the cheek, or the lips for that matter. She tried to calm the fluttery feeling in the pit of her stomach. "I brought the wagon with me, just as you asked me to." He gestured behind her desk. "You received a lot of pumpkins from your students." She eyed the pumpkins that had been given to her over the past week. Some of the farmers grew pumpkins on their farms, and each year they gave her some of the bounty. She and Ma would be canning pumpkins and making pumpkin pies this weekend. Just thinking about eating the pumpkin treats made her mouth water. She made the best pumpkin pie, and she longed to share one with Timothy and Lily. "Yes, thank you. I'm grateful that my students give me pumpkins, since Pa doesn't grow them on the farm." He chuckled. Oh, how she loved to hear Timothy laugh. They'd been studying every night for 2 weeks and had gotten into a slow, easy routine of studying. She'd found that having him help her really did prove beneficial to her learning. They'd been steadily making their way through the study manual, and come exam time, she'd be more than ready to take the exam, Lord willing. "Why are you laughing?" "Because I have more pumpkins back at your house. I gave them to your Ma this morning." She raised her eyebrows. "Really?" "Yes, folks have been paying me for my medical skills with pumpkins and other squashes." In their town, a lot of the folks didn't always have money to pay the doctor. She recalled that Doc Smith used to accept payment in the form of livestock, fruit, and vegetables. After they'd loaded the pumpkins into the wagon and she and Lily had gotten settled in for the short ride home, she thought about all that had occurred since she finally agreed to let Timothy help her study for the entrance exam. Her Ma continued complaining about her plans to attend college, but Deborah had learned not to focus too much on her Ma's negative words. Her Pa, usually quiet and reserved, had actually given her his blessing. And then Ma had gotten mad at Pa for encouraging Deborah. Even though her decision caused disharmony between her parents, she still felt that the Lord wanted her to attend college. Deborah's home life had been very different since Timothy and Lily came to town. Seeing Timothy every day for meals with her family while she bonded with her niece had added some joy to her life. As Timothy guided the horses, she thought about other things that had happened over the last 2 weeks. The first evening, she'd studied with Timothy in the room next to the barn, with her cat Susie as company. Her Ma had had a conniption. "It just isn't right for you to be alone with him for so long in the evening. If you're really going to pursue this foolish notion, then you and Timothy need to do your studying right here in the house, at this kitchen table." Deborah had been hurt that her Ma referred to her college degree as a foolish notion. However, she agreed. She needed to study with Timothy at the kitchen table. Since her aspirations were no longer a secret, she didn't have to hide out in the barn to study. As Timothy steered the wagon toward her home, he cleared his throat. "Unless a patient needs to see me, I should be able to accompany you and your parents to church this Sunday." For the last couple of Sundays, Timothy had been treating patients and had been unable to attend church. "That sounds nice. We have a wonderful pastor. I'm sure you'll enjoy the sermon." She'd attended church with Pa, Ma, and Lily over the last couple of weeks. The thought of attending church with Timothy excited her. Eve shoved the dishes into the tub of hot, soapy water. She shook her head, her movements quick with anger as she washed the dishes. "How could you be smitten with Deborah? My sister doesn't want to marry. Besides, if it weren't for your incompetence, I'd be alive right now. It's your fault that I'm dead, Timothy." Her loud voice exploded in the kitchen right before she pushed the tub of water toward him. "Get away from me." Her dark eyes sparked with anger, and she stomped out of the room. Timothy jerked awake. He pushed off the sweaty, tangled mass of sheets and rolled out of bed. Groaning, he poured a cup of water from the pitcher. The cool liquid slid down his parched throat. He'd had the dream. Again. It was the same as always, except this time Eve had mentioned Deborah. Just hearing her accusations, her pain, sliced right to the core of his heart. "Lord, are you trying to tell me something? Why would I dream about this now?" In his dream, Eve had looked just as she always looked whenever they had an argument. They'd done a lot of arguing during their tumultuous marriage. Her angry words had been hurled at him like the stone that David had slung toward Goliath. He lamented about the terrible dream as he donned his clothes for church. He pulled his recently polished shoes onto his feet. "Are you ready, Lily?" His daughter got dressed herself, but Mama June and Deborah would usually check to make sure her hair looked presentable before she left for school or church. Deborah. She'd been dominating his mind lately, and now his dream about Eve. He didn't know if he should give the dream further thought, but it was hard to forget Eve's cold, cruel anger in the dream. "Yes, Daddy, I'm ready." Lily's voice interrupted his thoughts. His daughter grinned, showing a gap where she'd recently lost a tooth. After they ate some cold biscuits, they exited the house. As they walked toward Deborah's home, he thought about how his life had changed over the last couple of weeks. He'd been studying every night with Deborah. He'd also seen Mama June's open disapproval regarding her daughter's educational goal. He'd wanted to try to reason with Mama June, but he sensed that Deborah didn't want him to interfere in her relationship with her parents. It bothered him whenever she frowned, upset about her ma's disapproval. He sighed as he continued walking toward Deborah's house. With startling clarity, he realized that he enjoyed spending time with Deborah. They'd developed an easy camaraderie while they worked together. She always smelled nice, too. Sometimes she smelled like peppermint. Other times she smelled of basil or wildflowers. Whenever she was concentrating, trying to figure out an answer, she'd bite her lower lip and scrunch her eyebrows together. Heaven help him. Whenever she came up with the correct answer or got excited about learning something new, the urge to kiss her consumed him. He liked working with her, but he also felt guilty. Eve had been dead for a year. Was it wrong for him to have feelings for her twin sister? Was Eve looking down from heaven right now, frowning because he was falling for Deborah? "Hi, Timothy," Deborah greeted him from the door, giving him a smile as warm as sunshine. She looked fetching in her yellow bonnet and brown dress. He resisted the urge to take her hand and hold her in his arms. "Good morning," she frowned. "What's wrong? You look upset." Was it so obvious? He mentally sighed. No way could he let her know that the dream he'd had the previous night was haunting him. "Just had trouble sleeping last night. Are all of you ready to go to church?" "Yes, we're ready." After he, Lily, Mama June, Papa Daniel, and Deborah had settled in the wagon, he flicked the reins to steer the horses toward the school building. The town was so small that the schoolhouse doubled as the church. As they got out of the wagon and made their way toward the steps, he again resisted the urge to hold Deborah's hand. She walked beside him, her gentle peppermint scent wafting toward him. "Excuse me, doctor," a loud voice called from behind him. He turned around and spotted one of the most beautiful women he'd ever seen in his entire life. Her long dark hair curled and shimmered in the sunlight, and her light brown eyes were fringed with long lashes. She wore a fancy brown dress and carried a parasol. He couldn't imagine why she'd need a parasol on this cool autumn morning. Yes? Before focusing on the beautiful lady again, he quickly glanced behind him and realized that Deborah, her parents, and Lily had already gone into the school. "I'm Clara Blue, and this is my ma, Mildred Blue." He then noticed the short, becoming woman standing beside Clara. He shook both of their hands and dipped his head. "Pleased to make your acquaintance. I'm Timothy Washington." Clara giggled and fingered his shirt. "Oh, we know who you are, Doctor. I haven't seen you at church since you came to town. I was wondering why you hadn't yet shown up to serve the Lord." The slight disapproval in her voice made him pause. Taken aback by the comment, he didn't respond. "My daughter is 18, Doctor, and is still learning how to converse well with others. I'm afraid she sometimes forgets her manners." No harm done. He really needed to get inside the church. "Again, I'm pleased to meet both of you. I need to go into the church to sit with my family." "Oh, Doctor," Clara whined. "Why don't you sit with me and my ma? We'd love to have you sit with us, and maybe you can come over for dinner afterward. We're having fried chicken, apple pie, and buttermilk biscuits." Fried chicken and apple pie sounded nice, but he honestly didn't think he could stomach sitting beside Clara for an entire afternoon and hearing her whiny voice. Plus, she smelled like a perfume bath. The smell proved almost too much for him to handle. She didn't have the nice, gentle smell of peppermint and wildflowers like Deborah. He mentally shook his head. Now, why did he have to go and compare Clara to Deborah? Well, he had to be a gentleman. He escorted Clara and her ma into the school. He glanced around the crowded room. Deborah and her parents and Lily sat on a bench near the front, no empty seat for him. He frowned. Why didn't Deborah save him a seat? "Doctor, come sit with us," Clara issued the command before patting the empty spot on the bench beside her. Well, it appeared he didn't have a choice. He sat beside Clara and her ma while the pastor began the service. After the congregation sang a few hymns, he struggled to listen to the pastor as he preached about Christian charity. He mentioned that Stephen advocated for the widows and children, making sure they had enough food. Timothy enjoyed the pastor's message. He'd not yet formally met the preacher, so he needed to be sure to do so after the service was over. In spite of the preacher's eloquent message, he eagerly waited for the sermon to end. He felt sick. It was Clara's strong perfume. He was sure of it. The pungent smell was making him ill, and the urge to get away from her consumed him. After the sermon and prayer, Clara tugged on his sleeve. "Doctor, I have a headache. Could you please come this afternoon?" She then told him how to get to her home. "Clara." Stark disapproval tinged her ma's voice. Why was her ma so upset? Taken aback, speechless, he looked directly at Clara. Now he understood why her ma sounded so angry. Clara's eyes sparkled with good health, and he highly doubted she had a headache. No way was he falling for this woman's shenanigans. "Perhaps you should lie down when you arrive home." Clara sniffed as if she had a runny nose. "Please, doctor?" "Clara." Mildred Blue glared at her daughter. What could he do? He'd just met Clara. What if she really was ill? He squeezed his eyes shut. "Lord, please help me." Folks were slowly filtering out of the church. He overheard them talking about rushing home to eat their Sunday dinner. He figured Deborah and the rest of the family would be waiting for him at the wagon. He focused on Mildred Blue. Somehow, that seemed like the safest thing to do. "I have to go and get my bag. I'll be there as soon as I can." Chapter 8. "I just can't believe I'm being courted by the new doctor." Clara's strong voice resonated in the mercantile. She obviously wanted everyone to hear what she had to say. Deborah pursed her lips and rolled her eyes. Clara's voice was so loud, she sounded like a town crier. Deborah highly doubted Timothy was courting Clara, but he had quickly fallen in love with beautiful Eve, so she could imagine his being smitten with pretty Clara. Clara was in the back of the store. probably talking to one of her friends. The woman loved socializing. She reminded Deborah of Eve so much, and that was probably why Timothy was attracted to her. He'd spent the last 2 Sunday afternoons at Clara's house. The first time, Clara had had a headache, of all things. The second Sunday, Clara's ma, Mildred, had been ill. Deborah had known both ladies for years. Mildred really had been sick. Apparently, Timothy had given her some medicine, and Clara had served him dinner. Since Mildred had to stay in bed for a few days because of her illness, Timothy had had to go to Clara's home to treat her ma. She'd hardly call that courting someone. Deborah had continued studying with Timothy, and they were making progress. However, he'd been reserved and quiet, and not nearly as friendly as he used to be. She had so many questions to ask him, but she just didn't have the courage to do so. "Can I help you?" An unfamiliar woman spoke to her from across the mercantile. She looked to be about the same age as Deborah, and she smiled widely. "Good afternoon. I don't believe I've met you before?" She approached the woman, curious. She'd known the owners of the mercantile for years, and she'd not heard that they'd sold their store. "I'm Lucy. The owners recently hired me to work in the store." "I need help," Clara commanded from the counter. Looked like she'd finished her conversation with the woman she'd been speaking to earlier. Clara nodded at Deborah. "Hello, Deborah." Deborah returned the nod. "Hello, Clara. Nice weather we're having." "Well, it's been a mite too cold for me." There'd been a definite cool autumn snap in the air, hinting at the forthcoming winter. Deborah loved the cool autumn mornings, but she didn't think it was wise to tell Clara that she enjoyed the changing weather. At times, when someone disagreed with Clara, the woman had a fit and wouldn't stop arguing until everyone agreed she was right. Lucy approached the counter to help Clara select fabric, and Deborah continued browsing the shelves. She needed coffee, more chalk for school, flour, oatmeal. Her ma needed so many things. It had been a good long while since they'd been to the mercantile, and she'd been so unsettled lately, an outing seemed like a nice idea for a Saturday afternoon. After Clara had taken her exit, Lucy again approached Deborah. "Did you need help finding anything?" "No, thank you. I think I found everything I need." She placed her items on the counter. "My ma goes through a lot of flour when she makes her hand pies." Lucy grinned. "I've heard about your ma's delicious hand pies. I'll need to try one." "You should. They're the best pies I've ever tasted." Lucy gestured toward Deborah's merchandise. "I'll get somebody to carry that to your wagon." The woman hesitated and bit her lip. "How about sitting with me for a spell and having a cup of coffee? I'm new in town and don't know anybody yet." Deborah paused, mentally sighing. She really wanted to get home and get some studying done this afternoon. She wanted to be ready when Timothy quizzed her after supper. "I don't mean to keep you. Just being friendly is all." "Well, why not?" There was nothing wrong with being friendly. Her ma was always chastising her about spending too much time alone. She was sure Ma would be thrilled that she'd shared coffee with the new mercantile worker. "Yes, I'd love a cup of coffee." She and Lucy strolled to the back of the store, where Lucy settled into the seat across from her. Deborah sipped her coffee. "So, where are you from?" "Maryland. Just arrived almost a week ago. My husband died in the war." Deborah set down her cup. "I'm so sorry." Her town had lost a number of men in the war against slavery. Lucy waved the comment away. "It happens. I still miss him. We never had any little ones, so I'm sad about that. I'm 30, and don't take kindly to the men who've courted me since my Stanley died. I'll probably never marry again." Lucy sipped her coffee. "How about you?" Lucy seemed so open and friendly. The urge to tell her about Timothy, Eve, and her dream of going to the women's college swelled within her. For some reason, she liked that Lucy was 30, a little bit older than she, and was unaware of her reputation as the town's spinster schoolteacher. Unable to resist, she told Lucy about her history with Timothy, Eve's death, Timothy's return to town, and his apparent courtship with Clara. Lucy listened intently, in spite of the fact that they were interrupted by customers. After she'd finished talking with Lucy, Deborah felt better. Sharing her feelings, her dreams, with someone felt refreshing. Lucy poured them fresh cups of coffee. She appeared to be weighing her words, pondering. Even though she'd just met Lucy, Deborah sensed that she was wise and sensible. She pulled out her pocket watch and realized that she'd been sitting there talking to Lucy for 2 hours. She honestly couldn't recall the last time she'd had such a long conversation with someone. Truth be told, the last time she'd spoken to anyone at such length was with her ma, pa, or Eve. "So Deborah, your twin sister Eve?" "Yes." "Was she a kind person?" Such an odd question. Deborah paused, unsure of how to respond. Eve was just Eve, talkative, friendly. Like I mentioned, we were not alike at all. Lucy touched her hand. "Just think about it. When you told me about how you used to spend time with Timothy and then he started courting Eve, I felt the need to ask you that. You don't have to answer the question if you don't want to." She frowned. "You mentioned that Timothy has been quiet lately?" "Yes. He might be feeling guilty about his feelings for you because of your sister Eve. He might feel that he's being unfaithful to her." She shrugged. "I know that seems strange since Eve has passed away, but I'm familiar with such feelings because I'm a widow myself. Even though I never had particularly romantic notions for the few men who've courted me since Stanley's death, I still felt like I was doing something wrong when I was courted by a man. It might take Timothy some time to get used to feeling romantic for somebody other than Eve." Oh, Lucy must not have understood everything she'd just said. "But he doesn't have romantic feelings for me." "I think he does, from what you're telling me," Lucy shrugged. "Of course, I could be wrong, but..." She shrugged again. "I think he likes you, and that's one reason he wants to help you. He knows that going to college will make you happy, and he wants you to be happy." Deborah raised her eyebrows. "Lucy, I don't know about that. You mentioned Clara." Lucy changed the subject. "He's not courting her. I don't think he even likes her, not romantically. Clara has been coming into this store every day for the past week. She usually waits until another woman shows up in the store, and then she starts boasting about the doctor being her new beau. She wants attention, and I think she's stretching this out to get as much attention as she can. I think she knows that in a matter of time, folks will realize the doctor is not courting her." Now, that was no surprise. Even though they're not officially courting, I think he still might find her attractive. Lucy took a sip of her coffee, then said, "Yes, he might. Most men would find Clara attractive, but that doesn't mean they'd want to court her." She tapped her fingers against a nearby barrel of pickles. "My advice to you would be to simply ask Timothy." Deborah blinked. "Ask him what?" "Simply ask him about why he's been so quiet lately. Sometimes you've got to just come right out and ask a man what's wrong. Do your ma and pa always listen in on you and Timothy when you study in the kitchen?" "Yes, they're right in the next room." "Well, take him out on the porch. Serve him some of your ma's hand pies. Have a nice chat alone and ask him if something's bothering him. Tell him that you're concerned and would like to help him same as he's helping you. Do that and see what he says." Deborah pondered Lucy's words as Lucy got a delivery boy to help load her supplies into the wagon. Right before she flicked the reins, she paused. "Lucy, would you like to come to my home tomorrow for Sunday dinner?" She'd just made a new friend, and it would be nice to have someone to converse with during the family meal. Besides, if she wanted to be honest with herself, she wanted her new friend to meet Timothy. She appreciated Lucy's insight, and she loved being able to talk to someone about all that had been bothering her lately. Lucy grinned. "I'd be much obliged, Deborah." Chapter 9. Timothy clutched his bag as he strolled toward the schoolhouse. He'd been dreaming about Eve almost every night for the last 2 weeks. In spite of his bad dreams, he still craved spending time with Deborah. They were 3/4 of the way through the book for her exam. If their pace continued, and if Deborah continued learning as well as she had, he thought she'd be ready to take the test. He'd been shocked the previous day when Deborah's family had a guest for Sunday dinner. No, not Deborah's family. Deborah had had a dinner guest. Lucy, a new worker at the mercantile, was now Deborah's friend. It had been strange but refreshing to see Deborah talking companionably with another female. She seemed happier, not so worried about the exam. She'd been studying so hard, it was possible her confidence was built up, and she was no longer fearful about not passing the exam. For some reason, Deborah and Lucy seemed to get along superbly. Lily also seemed to take to Lucy. She showed Lucy her doll and told her about her friend Abigail. Deborah had been full of surprises. When Lucy had gone home after Sunday dinner, Deborah said she wanted to walk him and Lily home. On the way to his house, she'd asked him to come and speak to her students about his medical career the next day. She said she wanted her students, especially her female students, to study and perhaps go to college if they could. She was trying to let them know that it was all right to be intelligent. She'd even hinted that she might want to start a lending library in town. She said they might be able to keep spare books in the back room of the schoolhouse. Seeing her enthusiasm warmed his heart. When they reached his home, he'd again been tempted to kiss her. But of course he didn't act on his feelings. Lord, what am I going to do? He approached the schoolhouse. It was unseasonably warm for a late October day, and he spotted the partially open door of the schoolhouse. He stopped for a few seconds, thinking. He wiped the sweat from his brow as he made his way up the stairs. Deborah's voice, sweet and clear, drifted from the room. "So, class, what is this plant called?" "Goldenrod," one of her pupils answered. "How about this one?" "Queen Anne's lace," another pupil responded. She continued quizzing the children about the plants. Her science plant project had been a huge success, and he was glad the children seemed enthusiastic about it. Should he go in and interrupt them? He gently pushed the door, and the squeaky hinges announced his arrival. Deborah looked up from the chalkboard directly into his eyes. "Class, Dr. Timothy Washington is here. Say hello. He'll be talking to us about what it was like for him to become a doctor." "Hello, Dr. Timothy," the children chorused. Lily gave him a small, gap-toothed grin and waved. He waved back at her and gave her a quick wink. He smiled at the rest of the class. "Good afternoon." He strolled toward the front of the classroom. He resisted the urge to kiss Deborah's smooth brown cheek as he set his medical bag on her desk. "Miss King asked me to talk to you about my job as a medical doctor. I thought I could show you some of the things in my medical bag." He grinned at the class as he opened his bag. "You can ask me questions if you wish." He removed several vials of powders. "I use these powders to help patients with pain. Some can heal illnesses." One of the older children raised his hand. "Which one of them powders do you use the most?" Deborah cleared her throat as she focused on the child who'd asked the question. "Remember to use proper English. Which one of those powders do you use the most?" The boy nodded. "Sorry. Which one of those powders do you use the most?" "White willow bark. It's an excellent remedy for headaches." "Is that what you gave Miss Clara for her headache?" "I heard her tell you she had a headache one time at church." One of the youngest female pupils sitting in the front row asked the question. His eyes widened at the bold question. Deborah narrowed her eyes at the girl. "Now, Sarah, you know you should raise your hand before asking a question. And it's not polite to ask people personal questions." Sarah raised her hand. "What's a personal question?" He eyed Deborah. She folded her slender arms across her chest and tapped her booted foot. She looked annoyed, and he suddenly had even more respect for schoolteachers. He figured it wasn't an easy job to teach a room full of children every day. She kept her eyes on the student who'd asked the question. A personal question is a question that most folks might not want to answer. But does anybody else have a question? She didn't seem to want to give nosy Sarah any opportunity to ask another question. One of the older students in the back row raised his hand. "How did you become a doctor?" "Good question." He looked at the student. "What's your name, young man?" "John, sir." Timothy smiled at him. "I'm glad you asked that, John. My parents." He paused, unsure how to address the fact that he was a Negro who'd had wealthy parents. Well, he'd be truthful without boasting. "My parents owned a business. After they passed away, they left me with enough money to go to school to study medicine. I'm sure some of you remember Dr. Smith? Several of the children nodded. After my schooling, I studied under Dr. Smith as an apprentice. He paused for a few seconds and removed a few more items out of his bag. After studying with Dr. Smith, I got married and moved away and started a practice. I returned here with my daughter, Lily. He gestured toward his daughter. After my wife passed away, the children were respectfully silent. He took the rest of the items from his bag. This is my stethoscope. He focused on the younger children. Does anyone want to listen to a heartbeat? All of the children's hands shot into the air like bullets. He laughed and glanced at Deborah, who also smiled. He ached to touch the cute dimple on her left cheek. Is it all right if I show them? I don't want to impose on your teaching time. He asked her the question in a low voice. It's fine, Timothy. When she said his name, it sounded sweet, like golden honey. He quickly focused on the stethoscope again. He didn't want the children to see him ogling their pretty teacher. He spent the next hour patiently, letting each student listen to each other's heartbeat. Afterward, he showed them his magnifying glass. He then showed the class another item. This is a lancet. Do you cut people open with that? One of the younger children boldly asked the question without raising his hand. I use it to draw blood. Why? Another child asked. Sometimes I have to draw blood to make a person feel better. He then showed the rest of the items in his medical bag to the students. His stomach growled. It must be dinner time. He didn't realize that he'd spoken for so long. Class, it's dinner time. I want all of you to thank Dr. Washington for speaking to us. Thank you, Dr. Washington. The entire class echoed their appreciation. You're dismissed for dinner, Deborah announced. The class scurried toward the door for nooning, grabbing their dinner pails. Timothy placed the items he'd been showing the class back into his medical bag. Timothy? Deborah approached him with her dinner pail. Yes? Would you like to sit on the front steps with me? I had a few questions about some of the material in my botany book. Of course. He escorted her to the front steps. He thought it would be best to sit in plain view of the students while they talked, since the schoolmarm wasn't allowed to have a bow. They sat on the bottom step. She looked a bit nervous. Nervous and rather fetching in her yellow bonnet and brown dress. The subtle scent of peppermint wafted toward him. A breeze blew, tossing multicolored leaves through the air. The echo of children's voices and laughter floated toward them as Deborah opened her botany book. The floral formula. It makes sense to me, I think. He smiled at her. She probably understood the formula perfectly. She just needed someone to study it with her. Abigail and Lily ran toward them, swinging their dinner pails. Abigail stopped and grinned while she traced the sketched flower in the book. What are you doing? Lily quietly stood beside Abigail. She seemed quite happy that he'd visited her class that day. I'm helping Miss King study the floral formula. Lily leaned toward the book and touched the drawing of the flower. What's a formula? Deborah squeezed Lily's shoulder. That's a good question, Lily. A formula represents something. She pointed to the letters and symbols in the book. These letters and symbols tell us about the different parts of a flower. For example, the formula for a rose would be different than the formula for a tulip. Both of those flowers have different scents, different petals. Abigail continued staring at the page. I don't understand. Lily smiled. I think I do. Abigail looked at Lily. You do? I don't know. Lily looked toward an oak tree in the distance. His daughter was still so quiet. It was refreshing to hear her speak her opinion about something. He smiled at her. Go ahead and finish what you were going to say. I don't understand what's in the book, but I think I understand that this, she pointed to the formula, will be different for another flower. Abigail stood up straight. Well, I'm hungry. Let's go eat, Lily. The twosome rushed toward the large oak tree in the schoolyard. Timothy grinned and looked at Deborah, who was smiling as well. You're setting a good example for Lily. Maybe when she grows up, she'll want to go to college too. I'm glad you're her teacher. Deborah grinned as she pushed her spectacles up on her nose. Thank you, Timothy. She pointed to the book. Can we study this for a few minutes? Of course. While they went over the formula, they were interrupted a few times by the younger students. Once they were finished, she shut the book and placed it on the step between them. "Doctor!" A young man stormed toward them. Timothy recognized him as one of the Thompson brothers who lived on a farm near the school with their widowed father. "My pa needs your help really bad. He's sick, something awful. He's got spots all over him. He's real sick, doctor." Timothy's heart pounded with fear. The man's condition sounded serious. "Deborah, I have to go." He quickly grabbed his medical bag. Minutes later, the two men sprinted onto the Thompson property. The young man ran into the house with Timothy behind him. "My pa's back here." Timothy eyed the older man lying on the bed moaning. His speckled skin and red eyes made Timothy's heart lurch with dread. He opened his medical bag. "Where does it hurt?" He made sure his voice was gentle as he asked the question. The man coughed. "My throat hurts bad." Timothy touched the man's forehead. He burned with fever. "Open your mouth." The white lesions in the man's mouth made Timothy wince inwardly. The man closed his eyes and moaned. He was obviously not in any shape for conversation. He turned toward the man's son. "How long has he been sick? Has he traveled anywhere recently?" "He took a long trip. Was gone to Philadelphia for a couple of weeks. He got back a week ago. Been sick for 5 days." "Why didn't you come get me when he started feeling ill?" He couldn't help the urgent tone of his voice. People's lives were in danger. "My pa don't like seeing the doctor. He said it would go away, but it didn't. It got worse. When I saw them red spots, that's when I went to get you. Someone told me you was at the school, so that's why I rushed there to get you." "Has he been in contact with anybody besides you and your brothers since he's been back?" "I'm not sure." "Well, think." Timothy's loud voice echoed in the room. The young man's eyes widened and his Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. Timothy needed to be sure the young man understood the severity of the situation. "I need to know who your father has seen since he's been back. Who has he visited? I need to know if you and your brothers have visited or seen anybody since your pa's been back in town." "Why?" "Because your pa has the measles. I don't want you or any of your brothers to leave this farm for any reason unless you need to get me if your pa gets worse." The young man hesitated, paced the room. "Come to think of it, he went to the store a few times. My pa's got a lot of friends. He's visited a lot of farms since he's been back." Well, it appeared he didn't have a choice. He focused on the young man. "This entire town is going to be put under a 21-day quarantine." Chapter 10. "Deborah!" Timothy's strong voice echoed from outside the classroom, interrupting her long division lesson. Something was terribly wrong. Mr. Thompson must be drastically ill. "Lord, please be with Mr. Thompson. Help him to heal. Children, stay in here and continue with your work." She rushed outside the building and slammed the door. Timothy stood in the schoolyard. "Deborah, wait! Don't come closer. Not yet." "What's wrong?" She stood at the bottom of the steps. "Mr. Thompson has the measles. We need to quarantine the town. Ask the children if any of them have been near Mr. Thompson or his sons. Let me know if any of them have. You need to send the children home. And we need to let everyone know that they need to stay on their own property for 21 days. Deborah rushed back into the school. She needed to hurry and do what Timothy had asked. "Oh Lord, we really need your help right now." Deborah quickly gathered all of the dried and fresh herbs that she could fit into her case. Timothy stood right behind her. "Deborah, we have to hurry. We can come back to get more if needed." She couldn't argue with him. She got into his wagon, mulling over how much had happened since their noontime chat on the school steps had been interrupted earlier that day. After Timothy had made his announcement, it had been discovered that 5 of the children had been in direct contact with the Thompson family. 3 of the children had said that their ma or pa had been feeling poorly the last few days. She'd noted their names, and all of the children had left in chaos. Some of them had been frightened, and some had been ecstatic about their 21-day hiatus. Timothy flicked the reins as they made their way to the first home on their list and Deborah continued to think about all that had occurred. For once in her life, she thanked God for an illness she'd had in the past. She, Timothy, and her ma and pa had already had the measles. They'd caught them when Eve insisted that they travel to Philadelphia for her wedding. Eve had always been one to put on airs. They'd contracted measles during that visit, and all of them had survived. Deborah knew they could not catch the dreaded disease again. However, Timothy was concerned about Lily. Although he knew that he was immune, he was unsure about his treating other victims and then coming into contact with his daughter. Could Lily catch the disease if she were around him? He needed to make sure he protected her. They decided that Lily would stay with Ma, quarantined on their farm. Deborah and Pa would stay with Timothy, since Timothy would need Deborah's help while treating the victims. She knew it would be downright awful if it were discovered that the unmarried schoolteacher was staying with the town's doctor, which was why Pa would be staying with them. Pa and Timothy would share a room, and Deborah would sleep in Lily's room. They returned to the Thompson farm first, because one of the brothers sent word that he was feeling sick. When they entered the room, Deborah paid attention as Timothy checked the young man's eyes, ears, and mouth and listened to his heartbeat. The man did not yet have a rash. However, he did have a fever. "How do you feel?" Timothy's deep, kind voice echoed in the room. "My throat hurts and my eyes hurt." Timothy touched the man's forehead and felt his throat. "You probably caught the measles from your pa. I'll be praying for you. You'll be seeing a red rash on your skin within the next few days." He removed a packet of white powder from his bag. "You need to take this white willow bark for your pain." He told him how much he needed to take. "Make sure you drink lots of water." Deborah placed a cool cloth over the man's eyes. "I made a mixture of peppermint oil, lavender, salt, and some of my herbs. If your skin itches, you can put the mixture on your skin. It might help you." All they could do was keep the patients comfortable. From what Timothy had told her, the disease had to run its course. She recalled the itchy red rash she'd endured shortly after Eve's wedding. Lord, please help them feel better. Hopefully, everyone would survive without after effects. They made sure the rest of the brothers knew how to care for their two patients. They visited several infected homes throughout that first night, Timothy giving instructions to the families. When they returned to Timothy's home, Deborah yawned. She'd never felt so tired in her entire life. The sun was just starting to rise, and Pa had left hard-boiled eggs on the table for them. Too tired to eat, Deborah fell onto the mattress in Lily's room and fell asleep. Over the next 21 days, Timothy and Deborah worked side by side, visiting the homes of the infected and treating the illness as best they could. As they worked together, she focused on leaving her herbs for the patients and explaining how they could use the herbs to relieve their painful, itchy skin. After 2 weeks, the rashes began to fade and the fevers broke. The townspeople wanted to break the quarantine, but Timothy had let them know in no uncertain terms that the afflicted were still contagious. Since most of their patients had healed, Deborah finally felt that she could relax for a few days. She'd prepared a special dinner for Pa and Timothy. After the food had been laid on the table, Pa entered the kitchen. "Looks good, I'm hungry. Where's Timothy?" "He's in his workroom. I'll go get him." Timothy had a workroom adjoining his house. As she walked outside, she recalled that Timothy had told her he needed to take stock of his supplies. She stopped walking as soon as she heard his deep voice spilling from behind the closed door. To whom was he speaking? "Lord, thank you. I don't think I could have stood another person mercilessly dying because of me. Amen." Shocked, Deborah didn't know what to think about Timothy's prayer. He was a good, strong, caring doctor. Working with him over the past 3 weeks had made her see what a wonderful, godly man he was. She thought about Timothy's prayer over the following day. Should she talk to him about it? The day before the school reopened, Deborah sat with Timothy on his porch. Pa was in the kitchen drinking a cup of coffee. Timothy glanced at her house across the field. "I miss Lily." "So do I." She paused, biting her lip. "Actually, I miss all of my students." She took a deep breath. needing to speak what was on her mind. "Timothy, I want to ask you something. When I went to your workroom to fetch you for dinner the other day, I heard you praying." She took a deep breath. "I feel bad that I heard your private prayer to God, but I just feel that I need to ask you about it. When you prayed that nobody would die because of you, what did you mean?" He sighed, his jaw tensed, and he pressed his hands together as if he were in pain. She touched his shoulder. "Are you all right?" "Yes." He paused. "I never told you about what I've been going through with Eve." She blinked, her heart skipping a beat. "You say that like Eve is still alive." She couldn't believe the words that had just come from his mouth. He sighed again. "I've been having dreams." She leaned toward him. "What kind of dreams?" He told her about Eve's accusations in his dreams. When Eve got sick, well, she'd been quiet, not been herself for a few days. She didn't tell me about her illness. By the time she told me, it had gotten worse. I tried to treat her, but it was too late. She died. His voice broke. If I'd treated her sooner, I may have been able to save her. She took a deep breath and touched his broad shoulder. "Timothy, I'm sorry." She stroked his shoulder while he swiped away his tears. She closed her eyes. "Lord, please be with Timothy. Help him understand that Eve's death was not his fault." She pressed her hands together, tried to think of what to say. She thought about the conversation she'd had when she first met Lucy in the mercantile a few weeks ago. She'd asked her if Eve was kind and had told her to think about it. Deborah had been so busy with patients, assisting Timothy, that she hadn't really had time to give much thought to Lucy's question until now. "You know, Eve could have told you that she'd been feeling ill. It's not always up to you to guess the way a person is feeling, especially if the person is able to speak and has a clear mind. But I'm a doctor." He pointed to his chest with his index finger. "I should have known. She probably didn't want to tell me she was sick, because she didn't want to bother me since I'd been working so hard." Deborah shook her head. "Or she could have said something. Timothy, as a doctor, you know that people will die. But I don't want folks to die if I have the means to prevent it. I know I'll lose some patients, but if there's anything I can do to prevent them from dying, then I'll do what I have to do to keep that person alive." Deborah sighed. She doubted she could convince Timothy that his reasoning was wrong. All she could do was hope and pray that somebody would be able to make him understand that he needed to stop blaming himself. Chapter 11. Deborah plopped down at the kitchen table, exhausted. Timothy and Lily had just left, going back to their home. School had started that day. She'd loved being in the classroom, and it had been nice to see the children again. After supper, Timothy had again helped her study for the exam. It would be given in 2 weeks, and even though they'd lost study time during the quarantine, she still felt ready to take it. As she put her study manual and botany book away, she recalled the conversation she'd had with Timothy the previous evening. What he'd told her bothered her deep within her gut. Again, she thought about Lucy's question, about Eve being kind. Had her sister been kind? She'd often thought of her twin as being self-centered. She'd thought Eve was like that since she was so beautiful, the same way Clara acted. But was she kind? "Why are you looking so serious?" Ma came into the kitchen and settled into the empty chair beside her. "I'd think you'd be happy. You and Timothy worked hard to help care for the quarantine victims. Nobody died. You should be praising Jesus instead of looking sad. Are you upset about the exam? Deborah, just forget about that test." "Ma, you know how I feel about going to college." She took a deep breath. Perhaps it would just take some time and patience for Ma to see reason, and to really understand why she wanted to do this. "Ma, I wanted to ask you about Eve. What about her? Do you think she was kind?" "Kind? Deborah, why are you asking me this?" She told her mother about her conversation with Lucy. Ma sighed. "I think Lucy asked you that question because you told her that you'd spent time with Timothy, and then he started courting Eve. I never understood that. I really liked Timothy. He's so smart and handsome. I could have a long conversation with him about plants and science and not get bored. Then, he just started courting Eve and didn't have time to spend with me anymore. It was so abrupt and sudden. She jerked back, her eyes widening. Ma, was Eve jealous because I was spending time with Timothy? Did she start flirting with him like Clara did? Ma, did Eve want to court Timothy simply because I was spending time with him? Honey, we'll never know for sure. Her ma looked away, toward the floor. Ma, Deborah sighed. That's why Lucy asked if she was kind. Eve only thought of herself. If Timothy hadn't been spending time with me, would Eve still have wanted him to court her? Deborah, you know your sister, was all Ma would say. After her ma had gone to bed, Deborah couldn't stop the thoughts tumbling in her head just like the leaves falling from the trees. If Timothy had truly had feelings for her 8 years ago, then he shouldn't have been so easily swayed by Eve's charms. Lucy had said that Timothy wanted her to be happy. Maybe he felt guilty not only about Eve's death, but also about his actions 8 years ago. Did he really enjoy spending time with her, or was he simply helping her to study for the exam to relieve his guilty conscience? Oh Lord, if ever I needed your help, it's now. Timothy eyed Deborah as they walked toward the tall red brick building at the women's college, where the test was being held. When they entered the building, they saw several women slowly strolling the long hallway, their footsteps echoing. Other ladies stood alone, open books in their hands. A lot of women had shown up to take the test. Deborah was the only Negro. Several of the women openly stared at her. Timothy ached to put his arm around her and let them know she had his support. He didn't know if his showing his affection right before the exam would bother her or not. He certainly didn't want to distract her right now. I can't believe a Negro is taking the test, one of the young ladies said, obviously wanting Deborah to hear her. This women's college had just admitted its first Negro students 2 years ago. Deborah ignored the comment. She'd initially wanted to come alone, but Timothy wouldn't let her. Since the quarantine, she'd been quiet and reserved. He'd thought they were growing closer when they assisted the patients during those weeks, but it appeared things had changed since he'd told her about his dreams of Eve. He figured that was why she'd been quiet and moody. As she made her way into the testing room, he touched her hand. I'll be praying for you. Thank you. She looked directly into his eyes. It almost seemed as if she wanted to say something else. He touched her cheek, and then she went into the room with the rest of the women who were taking the test. Several of the women openly glared at her as the proctor handed out the test booklet. Choosing to ignore them, Deborah closed her eyes while she clutched her pen. Lord, please help me do well on this test. When the signal was given, and she began reading the first question, Timothy's face popped into her mind. She recalled how he'd helped her study. For each question on the test, she thought about their studying at her kitchen table. She recalled his deep voice, asking her some of these same questions from the book. She loved seeing the joy on his face whenever she got an answer correct. Knowing he was praying for her, even now, she continued through the test, finishing just before the proctor called out that time was up. When Deborah exited the room after the test, she bit her lower lip, looking nervous. Timothy approached her as other women spilled out of the room. What's the matter? I hope I did well. He touched her soft cheek again. I'm sure you passed. Next year you'll be a student at this college. Don't let those ladies' comments about your being a Negro bother you. God is behind you. He took a deep breath. If they give you trouble, share your faith with them. I don't know if they'll listen, but they need to know that you're following your calling and that they are acting in an ungodly manner. I'll remember that if I attend this college. She took a deep breath. Thank you for escorting me to the test, Timothy. I was happy to do it. He'd had to reason with her so she would allow him to accompany her. He again recalled how she'd initially rejected his offer to help her study. He figured Deborah was used to being a loner and not always open to accepting help from others. Hopefully, she was learning that it was all right to allow others to assist her. After they'd exited the building, he gestured toward the restaurant across the street. Would you like to share dinner with me? She shook her head, fingering the strings of her pretty red bonnet. I'm not hungry. I want to go home. Deborah, you haven't had anything to eat since breakfast. He touched her shoulder. You might get hungry once you're in the restaurant and smell the food. He breathed with relief when she finally nodded and agreed to his invitation. He gently touched her back as they entered the small restaurant. The scent of meat and vegetables filled the air. He wiped his sweaty palms on his pants before pulling out Deborah's chair for her. She sat down, pushing her spectacles up on her lovely nose. He sat down across from her as the waitress approached the table. We're only serving stew and biscuits this afternoon. Would you like to order some? He'd heard they only served one meal each day. He smiled at the woman. It smells delicious. Yes, we'll order the stew and biscuits. She returned soon with 10 cups of water. I'll be bringing your food shortly. Maybe now was the time to tell Deborah all that had been on his mind. Or maybe he should wait until after the meal. He honestly wasn't sure how she'd react to what he had to say, so perhaps he should wait. He didn't want to spoil her dinner by asking the question that had been burning in his mind like a hot biscuit. The waitress returned to the table with 10 bowls of stew, as well as 2 spoons. He took Deborah's lovely hand, and they bowed their heads. Lord, please be with us as we enjoy our meal. Thank you for allowing me the pleasure of having Deborah's company today. And Lord, please let us hear positive results from Deborah's exam. Amen. Amen. She gave him a small smile and squeezed his hand before releasing it. The stew was delicious. The roasted meat, potatoes, and vegetables were swimming in thick salt and pepper gravy. Even though he was nervous, he managed to eat the entire bowl of stew, and Deborah appeared to enjoy hers as well. She dabbed her mouth with a napkin. The waitress returned to the table. We have cake for dessert. Did you want some? Deborah smiled. I'd love some. Timothy looked toward the waitress. Yes, please bring us 2 slices of cake. The yellow cake was served on a tin plate with a shiny, slightly lumpy frosting in a separate bowl. He sliced into the cake and popped a bite into his mouth. He then tasted the frosting. The sweet and tangy lemon flavor went well with the cake. When the waitress returned for their dirty dishes, he gestured toward their empty plates. That cake was amazing. I've never tasted frosting like that. Usually you can't find lemons around this time of year. He could seldom get citrus fruits at any time. That's lemon curd. Isn't it good? Yes, it's wonderful. Deborah grinned. It was delicious. Thank goodness she'd enjoyed her meal. Now he could focus on Deborah. She looked at him. I guess we need to go home. I want to tell Ma and Pa about the exam. She frowned just a bit. Your Ma still doesn't take to your going to the college? She shook her head. She still doesn't. I tried to make her understand, but Timothy, sometimes it's just plain hard to reason with Ma. Unable to resist, he took her hand. Her eyes widened at their joined hands on the rough wooden table. Deborah, I think your Ma will understand eventually. You know that I understand what you are doing, and I think it's wonderful that you're following God's calling. He took a deep breath. I spoke with your Ma and Pa last night. You were out in your shed making peppermint oil. What did you speak to them about? Curiosity tinged her lovely voice as she looked at him. I wanted to know if it was all right if I courted you. I sensed that we were on our way to being a couple when we were working together during the quarantine. She pulled her hand away. Oh no, that was not a good sign, not at all. Lord, please help me say the right words to Deborah. I'm falling in love with her, and I don't think she realizes just how strongly I feel for her. Timothy, this is just so hard. What was she talking about? What do you mean? Well, I'm a teacher. I'm not allowed to have a beau. He sighed. Well, I believe you'll get into college. I highly doubt you'll be renewing your teaching contract. Well, that's true. She bit her lower lip and looked away. What's the matter? There are a lot of things that bother me. He widened his eyes and leaned back in his seat. He had a feeling this was going to be a long conversation. Do you mean there are things about me that bother you? Or are you speaking about something else? There are things about you that bother me. It would be difficult for me to be courted by you if I know you have guilty feelings about Eve's death. Do you still feel guilty about that? He sighed. If he'd never told her about his guilty feelings, would she have been more open to being courted by him? Yes, I do, but she grabbed his hand and squeezed it. Talk to somebody about it. It's not right for you to feel that way. Maybe talk to the pastor or somebody. My pa is pretty easy to talk to. Tell him. Feeling guilty like that will make you sad. I don't know if I'd want to be courted by you if you're still dreaming about my sister. Maybe you're still grieving for her, and you're simply not ready to court somebody else yet. He looked into her wise, honest, kind eyes. He'd not thought about how confessing his guilty feelings would affect Deborah. Is there anything else about me that bothers you? She released his hand and gripped the handle of her reticule, seeming nervous. Well, he needed to hear all she had to say. The urge to court her swelled within him like a wave, and he figured if courtship ever happened between them, it would take some time and a lot of prayer. Yes, I've been bothered by something since you returned to town. He frowned. This didn't sound good at all. What's been bothering you? Remember when I was 17 and you were an apprentice to Doc Smith? Yes, I remember. We used to spend time together. I liked spending time with you. I even learned a few things from you about plants and medicine. You were so smart and kind. He blinked, still unsure as to what bothered her. I enjoyed spending time with you too. If you enjoyed spending time with me, then why did you marry Eve? He winced. That was a question he wasn't expecting. Chapter 12. There, she'd asked the question that had been burning in her mind like a hot pot of porridge. From the shocked look on his face, he hadn't been expecting it. He needed to answer her question if he ever wanted to court her. He sipped from the tin cup of water that still rested on the table. He looked nervous. Well, he needed to be sure he told her the truth. I enjoyed visiting with you. I was even starting to be smitten with you. He paused and took a deep breath. One day when I was coming to visit you, Eve met me on the path. She flirted with me and kissed me. Sweat rolled down his brow. He swiped the moisture away as he told Deborah what happened. She continued doing this, stopping me from visiting you. One day, you and your parents were gone and, Deborah, I'm so ashamed. She took a deep breath. Ashamed of what? His face reddened. She gasped. You had relations with my sister and were not married to her? The question squeaked from her mouth. How could you? As soon as it happened, I went to your parents and told them we had to get married. Did my parents know what you did? Yes, I even told the pastor. Deborah, I'm not perfect. The first thing I did after it happened was beg God for forgiveness. After we got married, I changed. After your sister and I moved to a new town, I went to church and got baptized. She took a deep breath. But you always went to church before you married Eve and when you visited me. I did, but I'd never accepted Christ as my Savior. I never told the Lord that I accepted his gift of salvation until after I married Eve. Tears slid down her cheeks. She swiped the moisture away. I guess I didn't know you as well as I thought. I just assumed you were a Christian when we were visiting together, when I was 17. Oh, Deborah, it makes me sad to see you cry. I was struggling back then. I was going through a lot, questioning a lot. I was angry with God about my parents' deaths. It was a rough time for me. I'm so sorry. She shook her head. Timothy, it's not just you. It's my sister. I didn't realize that Eve was so. She struggled to come up with a proper word to describe her sister. Conniving? She blew air through her lips. Yes. I guess maybe deep down I knew, but I just didn't want to admit it to myself. She sniffed and wiped her wet eyes with her napkin. My friend Lucy asked me if Eve was kind. She sighed and placed her napkin on the table. Why would Eve want to hurt me like that? I don't think she was thinking clearly. She was self-centered. I think she saw that you were happy from spending time with me, and she wanted some of that happiness for herself. It's possible that she mistakenly thought that being with me would make her happy. She considered her own feelings but didn't think about how much her actions would hurt you. Deborah vividly recalled the day she'd accepted Christ. She was 14, and a week later the pastor baptized her in the river on the edge of town. Folks had congratulated her for accepting Jesus into her life. She winced, recalling that Eve had accepted Christ a week later. Had her sister had a real relationship with Jesus? Or had Eve accepted Christ because she'd been jealous of the attention her twin had received? "Deborah, what's wrong?" Timothy's deep, gentle voice interrupted her thoughts. "It's Eve. What about her? Did she know Jesus? Did she truly accept his gift of salvation?" She told him about how Eve accepted Christ shortly after she herself had accepted him as her savior. She swiped away the sudden tears that spilled down her cheeks. "Deborah, I hate to see you so upset. I think Eve was a Christian. After Lily was born, she began reading her Bible more. She often read the Bible with a group of ladies at our church. I honestly don't know how she felt when she was 14. I do know she said she wanted to make sure Lily loved Jesus." He sighed. "Our marriage was difficult and full of arguments. We didn't always agree on everything, and it was hard. But I do believe that Eve was saved." What a relief to know that fact about her sister. But this new knowledge didn't change the way she felt. She needed to let Timothy know what she was thinking. "Timothy, we can't court, not now. I need some time to think and pray about this." She paused. "It will be difficult seeing you at meals each day at my house. I need some time alone." "That's all right, Deborah. Don't worry about that. I won't come to your house anymore for meals. I can cook for Lily and me, or send Lily to your house to get our meal. The only reason I dined with your family is because your ma insisted. She wanted to spend time with Lily, and I think she's still sad about Eve's death. Take as much time as you need, and when you're ready to talk about this again, please come and see me." He paid the waitress for their meal. He then took Deborah's hand, and they exited the restaurant. So, she had to think about his request for courtship? The question had been spinning in his mind ever since he'd shared dinner with Deborah a few days ago. He peered into the Kings' barn and breathed a sigh of relief when he spotted Papa Daniel feeding the horses. He figured Deborah's pa would be out doing chores in the barn, while Deborah and her ma fixed supper. He'd already sent Lily into Deborah's house to fetch their supper pail. He'd told Lily that her grandpa would come fetch her when it was time for them to walk home. This would guarantee that he had ample time to speak with him. "Papa Daniel." The older man looked up from his chore. "Timothy, I'm surprised to see you." He strolled into the barn and helped Papa Daniel toss hay into the horse's feeding trough. They worked together silently. Once the feeding trough was full, Timothy assisted with hauling water for the horses. The nip in the November air felt good against his heated skin as he performed the chore. After they'd finished in the barn, he gestured toward Deborah's wooden crates in the adjoining room. "I have to talk to you. Do you mind if we sit down for a bit?" The older man nodded. "Let's rest for a little while." They made themselves comfortable on the crates. Susie scampered into the barn. Timothy lifted the cat and stroked her silky black fur. When the cat wiggled in his arms, he released her. He watched the animal run out of the barn before he focused on Papa Daniel. "I guess Deborah mentioned that she needed some time to think about my offer of courtship." "Yes, she did mention that. My Deborah is not one to rush into anything. She thinks and prays about it. She has to seek God's guidance." "Yes, she does. How could he broach this emotional topic? Actually, Deborah told me to come and speak with you." He raised his gray eyebrows. "Really?" Taking a deep breath, Timothy told Papa Daniel all that he'd discussed with Deborah when they shared dinner after she'd taken the exam. "I know it hurts Deborah to discover what I did with Eve. I also know she's upset about how Eve approached me. Sir, I wasn't a Christian at the time. I have a relationship with God now." He took another deep breath. "I'm sorry about what happened. I really am. I just wonder if Deborah will ever forgive me for what I did years ago. I also wonder if she can forgive Eve, even though Eve has passed away. I don't blame Deborah for being upset about what happened." "What about you, Timothy? Are you upset?" "Yes, Papa Daniel. I'm upset that my actions hurt Deborah. I'm also upset about Eve's death. He told the older man about Eve's illness and about the dreams he'd been having about her. I feel awful. Since I've returned to town, I've felt conflicted. I like Deborah. He figured he could even grow to love her the way a husband loves a wife, but only the good Lord knew if that would ever happen. But she's Eve's twin sister. It seems wrong for me to be with her, yet I want to see her. She's smart and pretty, and I enjoy spending time with her. He took a deep breath. Then, I feel bad about Eve's death. Was there anything I could have done to save her? Deborah's pa clapped his large hand on Timothy's shoulder. Son, you need to forgive yourself for all of that. Jesus forgave you when he died on the cross. He paused for a few seconds. If Jesus were here right now, what would he tell you to do? Surprised at the question, Timothy looked into Papa Daniel's wise, kind eyes. Jesus wouldn't want you to feel guilty about something that wasn't your fault. Son, you need to get on your knees and pray to the Lord about this. Ask him to lift away your feelings of guilt. He leaned back against the wall. Ask him if Deborah's the right woman for you. And then, if it's his will, to open up her heart so she'll accept your courtship. I'll be praying for you and Deborah too. You hurt her when you married Eve. Sometimes it takes folks a while to let go of pain. Pain can run deep, and you're returning to town and then both of you studying and treating patients together? Well, she probably was hoping you'd ask to court her. Now that you have, she doesn't know what to do about it. After they stood, Papa Daniel hugged him hard. You're like a son to me, Timothy. He released him. I'll send Lily out for you. Timothy thought about Papa Daniel's advice as he trekked home with Lily. After they'd feasted on dinner and Lily had gone to sleep, he went into his room. He dropped down on his knees, steepled his hands, and bowed his head. Lord, I'm struggling. I brought Lily here to live close to Eve's family. Now I'm dreaming about Eve. I still wonder about her death. I feel so bad about it. Please take away these bad feelings, Lord. Please be with Deborah. Please help her to see that I'm sincere about wanting to court her. I like Deborah. I could even grow to love her. Lord, I need help with so many things. My life is full of guilt and bad feelings. Help me, Lord. Help me so that I can be a better father for Lily. Help me to be the best doctor I can be for this community. Lord, please help me to feel happy and not full of guilt. He paused. I thank you for all you've done for me, Lord. Amen. After his prayer, he remained on his knees, his eyes tightly closed. The tense feeling in his shoulders lessened as he took a few deep breaths. He finally stood up. For some reason, he didn't feel sleepy. He lit his lantern and lifted his Bible from the shelf before making himself comfortable at the kitchen table. He opened the Bible to Romans 3:23-4. For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God, being justified freely by his grace through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus. He stared at the verse before touching the words with his fingers. He continued reading his Bible until the weak, early morning sunlight streamed through his window. Chapter 13. Over the following month, Deborah spotted Timothy only on Sundays when he attended church. He sat at the back of the church and allowed Lily to sit with Deborah and her family. Pa would occasionally bring meals over to Timothy and Lily, and he'd also fetch Lily so that she could walk to school with Deborah. The cool autumn days turned colder as December arrived. Christmas was coming. Most of her students were excited about the upcoming holiday since school would be out for a few weeks, and many of her pupils would receive Christmas gifts. As she strolled downtown on a cold Saturday afternoon, Deborah wondered what she should purchase as gifts for Pa, Ma, and Lily. She also wondered about Timothy. Should she purchase a gift for him? She sighed as she strolled into the post office. She eyed the small square holes built into the wall. Many were stuffed with letters while some were empty. She approached the counter. Good afternoon. She smiled at the postmaster. Good afternoon, Deborah. Expecting mail? Yes, actually, I am. The postmaster searched the cubbyholes before he pulled a letter out and slid it across the counter to her. The letter was from the women's college. "Thank you." She barely breathed as she exited the post office and stood on the street. A red wax seal embossed with the women's college logo was emblazoned on the back of the envelope. She broke the seal and slid the piece of paper out of the envelope. Closing her eyes, she opened the letter. "Lord, please let this be good news." She opened her eyes and read the letter. She'd passed the test with a high score. She blinked as she read the rest of the letter, which invited her to attend the women's college. Her heart pounded as she folded the letter and slid it back into the envelope. She closed her eyes and leaned against the post office building. Timothy popped into her mind. She thought about him helping her study at her kitchen table. His quick, agile mind and his friendliness had helped her reach this goal. She missed him. She ached to rush over to his house and show him her acceptance letter. Well, she wouldn't tell Timothy right now. However, she could share her good news with someone else. Taking the letter, she strolled across the street to the mercantile. Thankfully, it wasn't very busy, and Lucy met her at the door. "Good afternoon, Deborah. Looks like you have a lot on your mind." "I do have a lot on my mind." They hugged, and Lucy led her to the back of the room near the stove. Without asking, she made coffee for them, and then plopped into her seat. "So what's wrong?" "I've been seeing Timothy sitting in the back of the church. I know you've been thinking about letting him court you." Deborah had told Lucy about her conversation with Timothy. "So what's on your mind?" She shared her good news. "I was accepted into the women's college." She waved her letter in the air. "Deborah." Lucy's voice echoed through the mercantile. "We must celebrate." She jumped up from her chair and pulled a package of English biscuits off the shelf. She opened the box and placed the treats onto a tin plate. "I'll tell my boss to dock the price of these biscuits from my wages. This is my treat. Eat some." Deborah bit into one of the vanilla biscuits and sipped more coffee. "Thank you, Lucy. I got these biscuits to put a smile on your face." "Stop frowning, Deborah. Isn't this what you wanted, to get accepted into the college?" "Yes, but Timothy helped me to study, and now I'll have to go talk to him and let him know I was accepted into the college." "Well, talk to him. You haven't said a word to him for a month. Clara has been trying to get him to come to Sunday dinner every week after church. Of course, he declines her invitation. But how long do you think the man will wait?" "But there was so much we discussed the last time I spoke with him. Remember all that I told you about Eve, about what happened between them?" "I understand, Deborah. You needed time. But we all make mistakes. We're all sinners. Timothy made that mistake before he accepted Christ. He's trying to do right. The whole point of courting is getting to know the person. Timothy is a Christian, and he likes you. Give him a chance." Deborah asked Lucy how things had been going in the mercantile. As they chatted, they finished the biscuits and sipped coffee. After she purchased the supplies she needed and got them loaded into her wagon, Deborah continued to think about Lucy's advice as she steered the wagon toward home. After her visit with Lucy, Deborah continued to focus on her pupils. Since Christmas was coming, a lot of her students had a hard time concentrating on their lessons. They were restless, ready for the holiday to begin. She also purchased gifts for her family: a pretty coffee cup for Ma, a tie for Pa, a doll for Lily, for Timothy. She'd hesitated about what to purchase for him. She'd finally decided on 2 pairs of socks. Knowing how much he loved her Ma's hand pies, she decided to make a batch just for him. On Christmas morning, she packed the hand pies, a few fresh eggs, and some ham into her dinner pail. She scooped up her Christmas gifts and walked out into the cold, frigid morning. As she strolled to Timothy's house, snow fell from the sky. She leaned her head back and opened her mouth. A memory, pure and sweet, filled her mind. She remembered when she and Eve were children, and they'd stand out in the yard when it snowed. They'd open their mouths to catch snowflakes. If they had a big snowfall, they'd bring in a bucket full of snow, and her Ma would add molasses to it, making a cold, sweet treat for them to enjoy. Still grinning about the vivid memory, she knocked on Timothy's door. "Deborah." The surprised tone of his voice made her smile. "Merry Christmas, Timothy." Oh my, he looked so handsome. He wore his overalls and his beige shirt. He smiled back, showing his beautiful, milky white teeth. He gently pried the food bucket from her fingers and set it on the floor as she came into the house. Then he hugged her and kissed her cheek. "Merry Christmas, Aunt Deborah." Lily entered the kitchen. "Why did you bring the dinner pail this morning?" "Because I'm going to make breakfast for both of you." The girl smiled. Her dark brown eyes sparkled like jewels. She looked so much like Eve that Deborah's heart tugged with joy. She hugged her niece. "You brought Christmas presents?" Lily asked when she spotted the gifts. She jumped up and down, clapping her hands. "Yes, this is for you." Deborah pressed one of the gifts into Lily's hand. Lily unwrapped her gift and squealed when she saw her new doll. Deborah then focused on Timothy. "Merry Christmas." She gave him his gift. "Thank you, Deborah. Merry Christmas." He offered her a small package. Excited, she accepted the small, beautiful gift. The delicate scent of roses and lilac wafted from the rose-patterned paper. Carefully, she peeled off the paper and admired the fragrant bar of soap. "It's beautiful, Timothy." The soap was too pretty to use. She sniffed the soap as Timothy opened his gift. "Deborah, thank you. I needed new socks." She touched his hand. "I also made you a batch of apple hand pies. We can enjoy them with breakfast if you like." After they'd enjoyed their delicious meal, Lily went into the adjoining room to play with her new doll. Deborah and Timothy made themselves comfortable at the kitchen table. "Timothy," Deborah said, "I want to share some news with you. I passed the exam and was accepted into the women's college." "Deborah, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you." When he hugged her with his strong arms, she sniffed his wonderful scent of soap and hay. He released her. "Thank you." She took a deep breath. "I've given your offer a lot of thought over the last month. I'd love for you to court me." "Hallelujah." He pulled her into his arms again and kissed her lips. Epilogue. Deborah Washington. Her name was announced. She stood up, holding her pregnant stomach as she walked across the stage to receive her botany certificate. As she accepted the certificate, she glanced into the audience. Lily and Timothy were front and center, her ma and pa sitting right beside them. Timothy looked so proud. "I love you," he mouthed the words. "I love you too." She mouthed the words right back to him. She settled into her seat and listened as they called the rest of the graduates' names, thinking about all that had happened since Timothy had asked her to court him 2 years ago. Right after she'd agreed to his courtship, she'd started her term at the women's college, and they were married 6 months later. The town had had to find another teacher, but she continued helping Timothy with his medical practice. They worked well together. She figured both of them could fulfill their true callings more when they worked as a team. Her ma had finally accepted that she was going to be a college graduate. When she'd seen her interacting with the other students and realized how happy she was, Ma had learned to accept that going to the college was part of her calling, part of what she wanted to do to serve Jesus, as well as others. Her baby kicked. She rubbed her swollen stomach. In about a month, Lily would have a new brother or sister. Again, she looked to her family in the audience. Yes, she was truly blessed. She bowed her head and closed her eyes. "Thank you, Jesus, for all of your blessings."
I'm Cecelia Dowdy, the author of The Doctor's Bride. I want to thank you for listening to my novella. I hope you loved Timothy and Deborah as much as I do. I want to encourage you to hit the subscribe button. Your subscribing will enable me to provide more novels and novellas to listen to on YouTube. If you enjoyed The Doctor's Bride, I'd appreciate it if you left a short, sweet review on Amazon, Goodreads, or your social media outlet of choice. Reviews help readers to find new authors to enjoy. Don't forget to read the next book in the Romance Bride series. The next book in the Romance Bride series delves into the life of Francine. Previously a socialite, Francine is now impoverished, and she must rely on her friends to survive. As she's doing this, she needs to find a way to pay her deceased husband's gambling debts. Can she find a way to do this? Can a handsome blacksmith and his daughter help her with her plight? The Blacksmith's Bride has received tons of 5-star ratings and reviews. I'll leave a link for The Blacksmith's Bride in the comments. Thanks again for listening to my novella. And again, don't forget to subscribe. Have a blessed day.